Right, so hello and welcome back to another episode of the Bach and Arthur podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Ash Dykes. Hey!
Here we go.
Now, you are actually the first guest we've had on. We've had three, but you're the first one that we didn't know beforehand.
Oh, okay.
We've had some close friends on, but you've recently been on The Fellas.
Yes.
And Chip and Freezy came out of that, and they've never recommended a guest to us before. And they were like, this guy has some of the coolest stories we have ever heard.
Oh, wow.
You guys need to get him on because he is just like mind-blowingly fascinating.
Oh, that's great to hear, man. Yeah, I love that.
So yeah, you've also been on Joe Rogan, which is pretty impressive.
Which Joe Rogan to this, what a what a leap.
Bro's career is on a downward slope. I'm joking.
No, I'm really excited for this one.
Yeah,
really
man.
excited
Same.
for this.
Same.
Yeah, because we're quite outdoorsy. And so for those that don't know you at home, you are an explorer, athlete, speaker, author, and TV star.
Yes.
Quite
Don't know
a
about
lot.
the star bit, but it's there.
If people ask you, what do you do? What do you say?
Oh, it's always a weird one. I say either adventurer or extreme athlete.
Nice. Oh, wow.
Because you can't really say explorer because we're in the 21st century. Adventurous sounds a little bit, I don't know, you could go by Scooter, Land's End to John O'Groats and say I'm an adventurer.
Yeah.
Extreme athlete is difficult because that's more sort of the X Games. And so you kind of like, but I just say that anyway because it sounds better.
I think adventurer works well.
Yeah,
I like
so.
adventurer.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think that's cool. That's why I've worn my camo trousers today. So
there we go.
Fit in a little bit.
Yes.
You know?
But you're also a three-time world record holder. So today, I think as a general plan, we'll go through each one of those.
Yes.
And then your amazing trip coming up.
Yeah.
And then get a bit more deep into you and, you know, how you mentally operate and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Deep dive.
Yeah,
All
deep
these
dive.
crazy adventures.
Pick your brain.
Exactly.
Yeah. So to start off, 2014, Mongolia. Is that correct?
It is correct.
So
yes.
what exactly is the record for?
So that is the first person to hike solo and unsupported across Mongolia. So that journey was 78 days altogether, 1,500 miles, 3 weeks over the Altai Mountains, 5 weeks across the Gobi Desert, 3 weeks through the Mongolian steppe. And when I say completely sort of solo and unsupported, I know that some people have a van with them or like 5 miles away. Like, it was so bad and it was so reckless and dangerous that my insurance was invalid because you can't get insurance if you're unsupported in the country.
Oh my goodness.
And my evacuation plan was pretty much non-exempt. It wasn't really a thing. And so in order to survive such a journey, especially with the water sources being so far between each other in the Gobi Desert, you would need to pull a trailer because you can't carry a backpack on your back for that amount of time. You'd need to take at least 30, 40 kilograms of just water alone. And so you had to you had to pull a trailer. So I had a trailer built in a family friend's back garden that was 40 kilograms on an empty load, 120 kilograms on a full load, which is that? Tyson Fury.
Yeah, that's a heavy
Dragging Tyson through Mongolia.
Across Mongolia. Yeah.
I get tired carrying him on my back in this podcast.
Well, I don't know about that.
No, I'm joking.
And am I right in thinking this is a not only a world record, but a world first record as well?
Yes.
This was attempted before and no one could do it.
That's right. Yeah.
And you decided that's for me then.
Yeah, I was kind of like, and it was weird how that came about because I had done lots of early adventures, like fucking reckless adventures, illegal adventures as well.
Let's just throw that in there.
Yeah, and so when it came to Mongolia, whilst I had done all of these crazy adventures, I'd never done anything this serious before where a soldier had attempted, 3 times before, evacuated on all 3 occasions. He looked like Jason Statham. He was a badass. Had single-handedly crossed the Sahara Desert. And there's me, sort of a beach bum, Muay Thai fighter, scuba diving instructor, like, I reckon I might be able to do that.
What did make you think you could do it?
Well, at first I didn't know it was a record. And so I wasn't really interested in the record. I was going to do it regardless of being first or, 10,000th. And I was just kind of like, where can I go that I know very little about, that is extreme, that has no tarmac road? Because I think if there's tarmac roads, there's people, which means there's food, which means there's water. So there's that big safety net. And all of my adventures had pretty much been apart from the jungle sort of survival that I was doing, the rest of them, the cycles, the runs, all of this had been on a tarmac road. So I was like, I want to get off that. I want to be self-reliant, you know, sort of relying solely on myself to survive my way across, which is an extreme country in terms of mountains, desert, few people that I can sort of single-handedly look to cross alone. And I literally got the world map out. And I had been on the travel route for 2 years, teaching people from all over the world how to scuba dive. And the main topic of conversation was, of course, travel. Where have you been? Where do you plan on going? And no one was saying Mongolia. And I was like, why is no one going to Mongolia? And that's when I then looked up, you know, sort of what's in Mongolia, home to the Gobi Desert, the Altai Mountains, the steppe. You've got the camels down south, the reindeer tribe up north, the eagle hunters in the west, one of the world's most sparsely populated countries. And I was just like, mate, this sounds awesome. This sounds awesome.
What a dream.
You soon found out why people don't go to Mongolia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But, and I guess from that point, the best way forward was just look at those people who've done it before and ask them, you know, what you need to watch out for.
And you did reach out to them?
Yeah, and I reached out to them. And that's when I couldn't find anyone who had crossed it solo and unsupported. And that's the key factor here, solo and unsupported. You know, Mongolia, people have crossed the land, people have crossed the world.
Of course.
But the nomads, they continue to say it's reckless, no one does it, it's stupid. We take yaks, we take camels, or we go as a strong sort of nomadic community. And they all thought it was suicide. And so the bigger the sort of team became in Mongolia, in the UK, you know, internationally, they were all looking for those who had done it solo and unsupported. And when we couldn't find anyone who had completed it solo and unsupported, that's when I was like, right, this could be a big deal. This could be a career changer. And, you know, this could be fucking, you know, history. And I was at that age where I was 22.
Yeah,
very
you were young.
very sort of, yeah.
And what was, when you reached out to the people that had tried and failed, what were the main reasons?
With him, with the guy who had attempted 3 times, I specifically asked him what the dangers were. And he was a nice guy, you know, he reached out, he sort of gave advice, but his list was fucking intimidating. It was you need to watch out for the drunken nomadic drifters, the steep ravines, the stagnant water, the grey wolves, the snow blizzards, the sandstorms, the dry wells, and the list just went on and on. And I remember thinking, that's quite a lot of dangers. That's quite a lot of dangers that I had zero experience in. And then that's when I looked into him and realised who he was, what he did, and like what he did in the past. And that's when I was just like, put Mongolia to bed. You know, maybe look at Spain, France, you know, more populated, safer country. Maybe I need those tarmac roads, keep me safe. But then I was like, nah, come on. If I can put the right training in and the planning is right, and I know the water points, maybe I could be the first to do this.
So there was a time when you thought, actually, no, this can't be done. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, I was shit scared.
Yeah, I bet.
At the end of the email, he said, and I could never make sense of this until I was in the Gobi Desert. He said, just remember, incredible is the ability to continue no matter what. That was the last conversation I had with him. And I was like, what does that mean? What does he mean? Is that his way of saying, you don't stand a chance? Or is that his way of saying, like, I wouldn't attempt it because you could die? Like, what? I didn't know what it meant, but I would say that quote, that statement kind of taunted me for a good year or so to come. And I used that to sort of help motivate, because I just didn't know what he meant. It was like lots of question marks, like, is he advising me against it? And so the fear was there, you know, and he was followed by a pack of wolves. He was hit by snow blizzards, sandstorms. And, you know, he's got military experience. And for me, the biggest question was, I've never faced wolves. I wouldn't know what to do. I don't know how I would handle the vulnerability and the loneliness. I didn't know what I would do if I faced dehydration. If I come across a well and it's dry, how am I going to react? Because I'd never faced it. So I almost wanted to do Mongolia because I wanted to answer all of these uncertain questions that I didn't even know if I could handle myself. You know, the
that is a unique mindset,
right? So I wanted to test it, but it was in a reckless way where I gave up my life in Thailand, quit my Muay Thai, because I was training and competing, and if you win a fight, it would pay about 2-3 months worth of accommodation, because the scuba diving didn't pay you much. You don't make much money in Thailand, as you can imagine, as a scuba diver. And so there was no way that I could have really sort of raised the funds in Thailand to make Mongolia happen. So I had to sell all of my kit, moved back into Wales, in with my parents, couldn't afford no gym membership. And so the reason why the Mongolia trip was so reckless is because I couldn't really afford insurance, and they didn't really do anything that was unsupported. Couldn't afford no helicopter evacuation. I couldn't afford no carbon fiber trailer. So a trailer was built in a family friend's back garden. Hence, it was mild steel and 40 kilograms on an empty load. And so all of these kept adding up. And I do remember thinking, this is fucking dangerous. This is a bit reckless. But I'm so glad I went for it anyway, despite all of the fear and the nightmares, you know?
Yeah. So when you actually came around to doing it, what of the big challenges did you end up facing?
Oh, so
did you come
many.
up again?
Yeah, I bet.
Whip out the Muay Thai and a few wolves.
There was the wolves. I was told by the locals on horseback as well, horseback, and very sort of vividly saying like, down that way, not in English, just all sort of hand gestures. You know, there's wolves, and they were doing the actions, and they would point at me, and they'd be like,
oh my goodness.
They were advising me, don't continue. And I remember continuing and seeing like footprints, and I was like, I don't know if they're dogs or they're wolves, but you know, they've just told me I don't like this.
Was there anything in your head telling you at that moment, maybe I should turn back, or maybe I should stop, or
There wasn't actually.
you just didn't consider it?
No, I remember just breaking it down because it was anticipated to take 100 days.
Right.
And I remember telling myself because that would be so overwhelming. You know, with any career, anything that you focus on that you want to achieve, you look at the end goal of where you want to be. If you focus on that too much, it can just put you off starting.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was all about breaking down and visualizing the little steps. So I would literally take it day by day, or even section by section, whereby, okay, 3 weeks of don't think about the Gobi Desert. Let's just focus on the 3 weeks of the Altai Mountains, and then the 5 weeks of the desert. And then, so that was really important. So each day that I was sort of still alive, which is like, today was a good day. Let's see what tomorrow brings.
What was the closest, do you think, to not, you know, where you're going to bed at night and you were like, this is the closest I've come to genuinely not waking up tomorrow?
The Gobi Desert. The Gobi Desert was scary because it was 3 weeks over the Altai Mountains, and I think because it was cold, sort of snow blizzards, minus 15 degrees Celsius, I think I didn't really feel the need to drink water. And so I probably slightly dehydrated myself in the mountains.
Yeah.
So by the time I got to the Gobi Desert, and it almost changed overnight, and it's now 40 plus degrees Celsius. And I'm now trying to play catch up, but I'm now watching my water because I've got like a big water container, maybe 20 liters that I'm carrying, which is 20 kilograms. And I'm just watching it go down and down and down. And now on the maps that I was taking, because the GPS was awful, 2 days it lasted, and I was back to map and compass, sort of navigating on little paths. And the little paths were like my lifeline to the next water source. Well, the next water source was an unconfirmed water source. And by the time, eventually, after a couple of weeks, I arrived at that water source, and it was dry. And I was already in a dire. I don't think I'll be able to ever articulate the sort of mess I was in, the state that I was in, mentally and physically. The best way to describe it is to try to paint the picture of 40 degrees Celsius. You're out in the desert, pure sand everywhere, a mix of gravel and soft sand. So now the tires of the trailer are sinking in the soft sand. So it feels like 500 kilograms.
Oh my goodness.
There's no breeze. And I remember having to hide under my trailer, which only the top half of my body could hide under. And the bottom half was just melting in the heat. And because of the lack of water, I could almost feel my organs becoming more dry. And I was just in pain. I was delirious. I was hallucinating. And then I come across the dry water well, and I'm like, fuck. That's when it sort of hit, and that I realized that I could easily die out in the Gobi Desert because of this. And it wasn't necessarily a fuck up. It just felt like bad luck, because I did need to drink the water that I was drinking to stay alive. But now I had to ration, I don't know how many liters. Maybe it was about, I don't know, 6 to 8 liters for the next 4 days of pulling that through the desert.
Oh my goodness.
And the next
constant
water
sweating and
and honestly, at times it just felt too much. And people say, why didn't you walk at night? Because if you stand on the back end of like an Amur pit viper, or if you lose the small track, and it's kind of like a goat or a camel track, they know where the water points are, you're fucked. You know, you now maybe put yourself 6 days away from the water source. And I did have a satellite phone, text only, and my agent was in the capital, but I would need to allow 4 to 6 days for him to get to me and get me out. And I genuinely didn't believe it. At that point, I could survive 6 days. And so the only option was to walk for the 4.
Yeah, so you mentioned you didn't have like the evacuation plan the guy before had, like he had the option of a helicopter coming in. Do you think that actually helped you to complete the mission?
That's
because
the question.
with no plan B,
Yeah.
you sort of have to,
Yeah.
there's no choice otherwise.
Yeah, potentially.
Do you reckon if you did have the option of the helicopter, would there be any part where you might have gone, I need to get evacuated now?
Would I have pressed that sort
Yeah.
of
Yes, your
red
mind
button?
would be on it all the time, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And I do remember I went through a day of like sort of feeling really bad for my family. I felt it was a selfish decision. I felt I'm only young, you know, and now I'm here slowly dying. And, you know, I kind of almost feeling sorry for myself I was at that time. So maybe that's the pinnacle time that maybe I would have been like, I don't have it. I'll try again next year. Boom. But then there was another side, which I decided, 4 days is so hard, but I've always been a big believer in sort of visualization. Couldn't visualize 4 days. It was fucking great. I was in agony. The pain is unreal because it's almost like with hypothermia being cold, that's extremely painful, but then there's a numbing effect to it. And then it makes you feel all sort of sleepy and tired. And then the victims that are found from hypothermia are found with the hats and gloves and they just go to sleep. With the desert, you feel every single second you're in pain. There's no numbing. There is just, scratching on the desert floor on your fingernail. It didn't get to that point, but it was bad. It was real bad. But then I focused on 100 meters. I could see 100 meters. I was like, let's just get to there and then hide for no more than 5 minutes. And it was breaking down those goals, 100 meters walking, 5 minutes resting, that I eventually got to got to the next water source. I was just in a bad way. It took me 8 days to recover. Near the water source, there was a small community as well. And that was it. Then I was just sort of off the radar.
And was that small community the one that gave you your nickname? Because you earned a nickname when you were out there, didn't you?
Yeah, it was the capital city that started printing this nickname in the press when I was in the Altai Mountains. And I called my logistics manager and he was just like, I had like my iPhone and we had signal. And he was like, the locals here, they've come up with a name for you. And I'm like, oh yeah, what's that? And he's like, the Lonely Snow Leopard. And at first I was like, that's fucking cool.
That's such a cool nickname.
I was like, why the Lonely Snow Leopard? That's cool, right? He's like, because you've not yet been eaten by the wolves. Okay.
I love how you use the word yet as well.
That's what I mean.
It's
exactly. Yeah. And I was still in the Altai Mountains, so there was still a chance I could be eaten by the wolves,
If I got a nickname like that, I think that would just drive me onwards, to be called the Lonely Snow Leopard.
But then I was in the desert and I'm like, oh shit, only snow leopards don't survive out in the desert.
Oh my goodness.
And you chose a route. So you went from west to east.
Yes.
Mongolia, but you didn't just go in a straight line.
No.
You chose to go down, follow downwards and then back up, right? So you just made it harder for yourself.
Yeah, I always do. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I just do. I'm just like, this looks like the toughest route.
Yeah.
That's what it will be.
And so how much time went into planning that route? And were there alternative routes, or was this the one you were like, I'm doing that no matter what?
Yeah, there were alternative routes. You could effectively cut through the middle, but again, I believe I would have been on bigger tracks,
right?
And I just wanted to get away from sort of the easier way through, and I just fought down. And I also really wanted to experience the Gobi Desert.
Yeah,
and like cut right through there, walking alone through the desert. I thought, come on, that would be so cool.
Yeah.
And so that was a big sort of edge for me. And it was also the previous, what the guy took was that route as well, the previous guy. So I kind of looked at his route and I was like, okay, that's a very similar route. But it was, definitely the most dangerous route and like no water. But at that age, I was just like, fucking give me the challenge.
Yeah. And it makes the accomplishment even better.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. How did it feel at the end when you finally crossed the line?
Oh man, it was a buzz.
Yeah.
It was a buzz. But for the last week, for the last 2 weeks, I knew I had done it. So you kind of come to terms with the fact that you're the first person to do this, solo and unsupported. But you can't celebrate and you've still got to put in all of the mileage. So it's one of those. It's not like, Usain Bolt, for example, or a runner. They know in 100 meters when they get over there, they know if they've won or lost within 9 seconds. Whereas with me, it's 78 whole days. And by about 70 days, you know you've done it. But you still have to walk 8 of those days with toenails falling off, with blisters, with that the harness rubbing, with the thunderstorms, and there's lightning strikes all around you, and you're pulling a fucking trailer made of metal. And you just say, oh, here we go, I'm not done yet. No, clearly. You still got to put the miles in. So that's quite demoralizing.
Yeah. Did you have any idea of how many days you had left after each day had passed? Or was it more like, because you said, it was supposed to take 100 days,
Yeah.
but you were actually finished early.
Yes.
Did you have any inkling as you were going on that actually you were cutting time down, you were doing it quicker?
Yeah, majorly. Yeah. I think it was anticipated that I would cover like 15 miles because of the trailer. But when I was out there, because of the daylight hours, I think it was 16 hours of daylight I had. So I was smashing a marathon a day.
Wow.
Over a marathon with the 18 stone. And I was just kind of like, I became walking fit, sort of specific to pulling a trailer like a camel. Yeah. I was just like, kept going and going. I was just like, this is great. I think I'll be done a lot sooner than I anticipate. But then the Gobi Desert stint, that set me back majorly. And just the trailer in general, depending on the terrain, sometimes you would just like cover maybe 10 miles. And that's still all right in that terrain, but that was a bad day for me. And then other days you would cover, I'm pretty sure my biggest day was 35 to 40 miles. Because I remember calculating this from North Wales to Chester, which is like 35, 40 miles. And, you know, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And so I was like, right, that was a good track that I had, you know, like a goat track. It was fairly flat. Able to go
just
on.
zoom down.
Yeah.
Wasn't even downhill and you could like hop on the thing and like drive down basically.
In fact, there would have been if my trailer had 2 wheels on the front and the back.
Right.
But because the wheels were in the middle, it was imbalanced. And so, but it was also good for me because if it got too much, I could try to shift some of the weight onto the back of the trailer, but not too much where then it starts pulling you up, but enough so you're pulling it, but the weight isn't fully on you, pulling you down.
Right.
Which would work when it was flat, but in the Altai Mountains, you had to be careful because it didn't have any brakes either. And it was like almost double my weight, you know. So you're walking up the Altai Mountains and you're like, if I slip or miss a footing, I'm going back down.
And then on the way down, it's like...
And then it pushes you on the way down.
Yeah. Wow.
Which was freaky. Sometimes I was kind of like, should I turn it around and strap it and walk down with it in front pulling me?
Yeah.
But
I just have this image of you going flying strapped in.
Oh man.
You take one misstep and you're going down the mountain.
I'm gone. Yeah.
So that must have been quite an experience. And you finished that and thought, I feel like a lot of people would go through that and be like, that's me done for one life. That's enough. And 2 years later, you were at it with another one.
And I actually started planning the next whilst I was in Mongolia, mentally planning it. Because it almost helped to motivate me. I was almost like, I came up with this great idea as a next adventure. But I was kind of like, well, if you can't do what you're currently attempting, don't even consider that. So that was like the big incentive. Complete this and you'll be able to do that.
Yeah.
See, I saw the 2 dates and I was like, he must have had a year of just being like, this is the greatest thing ever. Going to bars, telling women, like, you know, just really living it all up. And just being like, you know, and then just sort of going, I'm ready for the next one. But you were ready for the next one midway through the first one.
I was good to go. Yeah, because I also knew that I had to build up momentum. So a big fear of mine was if I fail Mongolia, it'll be back to fucking, I don't know, the fish and chip shop, back to lifeguarding, back to Muay Thai or back to scuba diving. And I didn't want that. You know, I didn't
Doesn't sound like the worst life to be fair.
Yeah. You know what? In Thailand, it was good, but I would just know that's, unless you start up your own dive center, you're going to be a relatively poor man. And I remember counting the pennies in Thailand to see if I could take a boat from one island to the next. And Thailand's so cheap. I remember thinking, I can't do, you know, what about my family in the future? I'm there, like not being able to provide. So I thought this is a make or break. And because it's a world first and there's few firsts left out there, I thought surely this will sort of create a new career path for myself. And it didn't straight away.
Did you because I know this was like a decade ago almost, right?
10 years.
It's 10 years. So did you document it? Because YouTube wasn't really much of a thing back then?
Yeah, it wasn't. I was kind of quiet online for a lot, especially the early events. So from age 19, when I set off from Wales, to age 23, when I did Mongolia, this period, although I was taking photos and videos as I went, I wasn't on social media.
Right, yeah.
So I was just doing it for the pure passion. But, you know, had I have been on social media, that would have also been really cool and would have probably carved a career path sort of a lot sooner than it did. But I did film it anyway, because with Mongolia, I thought maybe Channel 4 or maybe a TV show will want to take this. So I did capture that journey, not for socials, but for TV. But it ended up, TV didn't take it. And 10 years later, I threw out the mini-series of Mongolia.
Yeah.
And within 30 days, reached 9 million, which is
Wow.
more than what Channel 4 get when they release a TV show. And I'm just
Incredible.
like, that wouldn't have happened 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm almost glad I held back.
Yeah.
Because I was gutted for so many years that TV didn't take Mongolia, didn't take Madagascar. Pretty much almost every other country took the Mission Yangtze apart from the UK. My latest show, The Great Wall, goes international apart from Britain. And I'm just like, what's going on? What's going on?
They're missing out.
Yeah, so I'm so
Big time.
pissed off with UK TV.
Yeah,
I can't
that's a
believe it.
call out, direct
Yeah,
call out,
it
UK
is.
TV. Pick it up.
9 million. That's pretty persuasive. That's more than this podcast gets, actually.
By quite a margin.
So yeah, do you want to go on to Madagascar then? So
Yeah,
2016.
2016 is when I finished. 2015 is when I started. So I think there wasn't even a year. I don't think there was a year between Mongolia and Madagascar.
Not even a year.
No.
Between finishing and
Wow.
starting.
There was 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
Did
there
you
was
even
6
physically
months.
recover in that time?
I don't know. I do not know.
Still doesn't know.
I still went for it. But yeah, so I think it was, February. It was when I started the Madagascar one. And this was a big sort of mammoth one. This is one that often gets overlooked because Mongolia is a big sort of solo and unsupported
Right.
mission. And then Mission Yangtze is like a 6,500 kilometer mission.
Yeah.
But Madagascar, it's only 100 miles longer than Mongolia. It wasn't solo and unsupported, but it took 155 days, almost double the duration of Mongolia.
Yeah.
And not one of those days was a plain sailing day.
No.
There wasn't one day of all 155 where I was like, that was a good day. That was a nice, pleasant day's hike. It was held up at gunpoint, avoiding bandits, drunken military officers bitten by spiders, bitten by leeches, crossing crocodile-infested rivers, attacked by locals, coming across communities that I'd never seen a white person before. Some were hostile, some were okay. And it was just back to back to back, almost losing my photographer on a nighttime river crossing in a crocodile-infested river.
God.
Cyclone season while summiting the 8 highest mountains. It was intense. Hunting, gathering, machete in hand, hacking through the jungle. Not one day. It was just like, that was good.
Wow, so you had a lot more human interaction that stopped you along
Yeah.
Madagascar.
Yeah, whereas Mongolia, I went over 8 days, didn't see a single human, which is weird mentally, which is kind of like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
If anything happens, I am like really screwed.
But everyone that you met in Mongolia sounds like they were...
They were amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
So why do you think it was so different in Madagascar?
I think it's just because in Mongolia, they have a richer life in terms of the freedom that they have, in terms of what you're able to grow in Mongolia, in terms of if you're sort of a nomad and you've got your family, your felt tent, your horse, and you can roam the land and do what you want, see the neighbors 100 miles away. They kind of just seem a little bit more connected. Whereas in the south of Madagascar specifically, it's really hard to get by. A lot of malnutrition. Malaria is big there. You've got the bubonic plague. You've got sort of how they hydrate themselves is a well on the beach, which is slightly filtered salt water, which they've kind of evolved to adapt to.
Oh.
So they're drinking this slightly filtered salt water, and then you can't really grow any fruits and veg down there. There's cactus. Cactus fruit wouldn't necessarily be good for us, but for them, again, they've evolved and they eat the cactus fruit. So it's really difficult. And I think being such a difficult place to survive, makes you a little bit more desperate.
Yeah.
And with that with you being so desperate, I think you're more likely to do hostile things. So they would see, you know, a white man sort of rocking up, pitching their tent, and then they would sort of make up a rule of, oh, we own this land. If you want to camp here, you've got to pay us this much money. And that was all petty stuff. I didn't mind that stuff. But other times it was a case of they would see me, would assume I'm French, and would want to fight me because the French ruled over 60 years ago, and they were pretty brutal. So it's also fair. So I'd always be sort of understanding as to what they're going through. It's a hard life. It's a tough life. They've adapted to that. So I think you're not necessarily going to be received with, you know, with such great hospitality, because they see you, and not only do they want something, they need something from you. When's the next time they're going to come across a white person where they can demand this or demand that? So yeah, it was hard. Down south was hard. North was a different story. There's more vegetation, more plantations. The locals are sort of more open, more giving, but because they don't need to take. Whereas down south, they sort of are fighting for survival every single day. Yeah. But they weren't all like that down south. I did come across in the sand dunes, bordering the sort of desert region, I came across a community. I say one family, and they were sleeping in huts built via bamboo and had nothing. The guy would go out and fish out in the ocean 3 o'clock in the morning. He would come back. He would leave half the fish with his wife. He would prepare for the family. He would walk 10 miles to trade the other half of the fish for rice and walk back. And that was every day. Fish, walk to the community, trade off rice and fish, and bare slightly filtered salt water, bare necessities. But yet they were so giving. They would, I'll have some fish. And I'm like, oh, thank you, man. You know, you eat that. I've got my food. You know, so it's like, wow.
Did you bring the food with you? Like, did you carry food with you on the whole expedition?
No, not up north, but I did for the southern section.
Yeah.
I took ration packs. Just put some hot water in there, and I'm good. And I'd have like 2 ration packs a day. And would save them if there were locals that would offer food. And we felt like, okay, we can take some of this food, try to give them money in return. Whereas it was opposite in Mongolia. You give them money and they'll be offended.
Right. Okay.
Even though they're kind of living a similar life, but totally different. They would see me as the poor man in a way that it's like, look around you. You know, we have this rich life. We go on horseback. There's no fences. There's no control. We can roam the land. You may be rich in terms of monetary value. You've got the finance, but we're rich in life.
Wow.
And that was an interesting lesson. You know, they didn't want anything from me. They're like, keep your money.
Yeah.
We've got everything we need. And I'm like, wow. Wow, totally different, you know?
Yeah.
Which was really cool to see as well.
No, really cool. And to give us an idea of route, because I know you went over the 8 highest peaks, right?
And again, I didn't need to. I don't know why I did
and
that.
You chose that route. Yeah, you decided that would be.
I was just like, so it was my logistics manager in Madagascar who actually called me out on doing the toughest route, a route that he was like, no one will even attempt to be second person. You just don't go there. And I was like, ooh, what's this? And he was like, it's the most southern point to the most northern point of Madagascar. Bearing in mind, it's the 4th biggest island in the world, 2.5 times the size of the UK in terms of landmass. It's a big island, but people think it's tiny because it's next to Africa. And he said, you've got this mountainous ridge that lies sort of central east of the whole island from north to south. Why don't you attempt to stay on the ridge? He said it's difficult for food and water. It's a much harsher environment. The rain it's like the terrain and weather system is tougher. There's few people up there. And the people that you will see, they'll either run away from you, or for some, they may not have seen a white person before. So you'll be really experiencing Madagascar, not on the coast. And I was instantly sold. I was like, let's do that. And then I upped that, and I'm like, let's do the 8 highest mountains to just make sure I stay on that ridge.
Oh my goodness.
So it's like,
Laura, could we get a map of Madagascar to give us an idea of this route?
Yeah.
So, because when I look at Madagascar, I suffer the same thing because it's next to Africa. Yeah, you don't realize how big it really is, and especially with the film coming out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's hard to really gauge.
And then it's down south as well, isn't it? So it's got that weird effect where it looks smaller down south. But there you go. It's
just to see the severity of the mission.
So if you type in actually map of Madagascar compared to the UK, that might give you a better scale. Just to put into perspective. Yeah, just to put into perspective. Usually there should be There you go. Yeah.
Oh,
Look
yeah.
at that. Wow.
You know, so it is like top left there gives you a good sort of idea of the size of it. So
That's
you're talking
nuts, isn't
from, and then it's like, it's wider, isn't it, and everything.
Oh, yeah.
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 Yeah,
And
so,
so
for our audio
just
listeners,
huge.
it's about twice as long and
Yeah, I
twice as
wonder,
wide.
if you were to put that probably in Europe, you'd probably cover a couple of countries there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
you would, yeah.
So,
Huge island.
Yeah, it's a
And-
big island. Yeah.
And so that's why it took you like double the time
Exactly.
of Mongolia.
Yeah, and not even that, it was the terrain. So you
Well,
go
yeah.
through desert, tropical dry forest, tropical rainforest, Tsingy, which is kind of like this sharp mountainous rock, and of course the mountains. The mountains are complicated because it's not mountains where it's technical climbing with ropes. You're kind of climbing up a mountain, but it's covered in jungle, so you've got your machete. Yeah.
Wow.
So on a good day, 16 hours, if you cover 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, you're kind of like, oh, okay, today was a
Wow.
good day. So we could see a mountain in the distance. It looks close, but we're like, oh, yeah, 6 days to get there. And you're like, fucking, it's right there.
How many calories were you burning every day doing
You know
this?
what? I don't know, but I know that I was probably taking in about 1,600 calories a day, which is like really bad.
Yeah.
Wow, that's nothing if you're not doing anything at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Were you withering away by the end? Were you
Oh,
a
yeah.
very,
I bet.
a very
I was
slender
just a
man?
skeleton.
Yeah.
I was just, I think
Wow.
13 kilograms I lost after Mongolia.
Wow.
I don't know what it was with Madagascar.
And so were you living off the fat of the land for this much? Like, were you sort of eating insects from under logs and this sort of thing, or?
So especially up north in the jungle, we were hunting and gathering. So the hunting would be sort of small rodents, and they would burrow underneath trees. So you'd see a tree, you'd see like this black hole, and you couldn't see inside, and you have to go pretty deep, and you've just got to put your hand in, hope you don't come
my
across like
God.
a boa constrictor,
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
and you just pull it out, its neck, and you've got a little bit of protein.
So
And
not
then-
only you're covering these massive distances, but you're hunting and gathering along
Yeah,
the way as well.
exactly.
How much
Yeah.
that slow you down? is
Hunting,
just
gathering,
incredible.
sort of machete through the bush, and even to camp at night because the forest's so dense, you're having to clear space for you to set up your tent. So it's raining, you've got bites from spiders, they're now infecting, you're having to pull off 6-7 leeches probably per night.
Oh,
and
wow.
flick them out the tent, having to know what you're eating that night. Sometimes you might have got coconut or mangoes, chilies. I always loved coming across chilies I would add to maybe we had like rice with us, add the rodent into the rice, and sort of off we went. So we weren't getting a lot of calories in us because of this, but it was like relentless. It's not just the hiking and the surviving and all the pain that comes with it and then navigating, but it's the bites, it's the hunting, it's the gathering, it's looking for a place to sleep.
And so, am I right in saying as well you were bitten by the world's deadliest animal, a mosquito? Was it?
Yeah.
'Cause you got-
You lost me then. I was like,
yeah.
You got
Yeah.
The deadliest strain of malaria one can
Yes.
catch.
You know what? At the beginning of this chat, when I mentioned all of these different things that I came across in Madagascar, malaria. You
Yeah.
forgot that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the biggest. Almost killed me.
That
And
just
so what
shows
was-
you how crazy the mission is for
Right.
malaria not even to be mentioned
Yeah.
when he's going through it.
Yeah. And from what it sounds like, you were on the verge of death from that. What was that like?
It was weird how this happened. So we escaped a bushfire. There was a bushfire, and we were like, it's getting closer, and the wind is blowing our way. Bushfire is another thing that I forgot to mention. So we had to physically run from the bushfire. We were exhausted. We had been in the wild for a while. And then we came across a small community. And we were like, oh, amazing. We can see smoke coming from their mud hut. There's going to be food. There's going to be water. They're going to look after us. And we arrived. That community then said, not to me, but I had a local guide with me, and he translated that the community said, like, look, guys, we're suffering with the bubonic plague. We've lost a couple of relatives. You're more than welcome to stay here, but you've got to stay in your tent. Don't be outside your tent, because obviously you've got the fleas on the rats and the dogs, and they're everywhere. And so we were like, I at first said, we should leave, man. They've lost relatives. I think they buried someone that day as well, so I just felt it was a weird, eerie atmosphere. I felt like we didn't belong, even though they were trying to be hospitable. But my guide was kind of like, nah, it's fine. We'll stay in our tent. We'll leave first thing in the morning. And so the locals did bring food to our tent, and it was eel and rice. And the eel smelled a little bit funky, but we were hungry. And we thought, well, these guys are eating it. They're fine. So we wolfed down this eel and rice. The next day we left and we were fine. but we were suffering with diarrhea. We had got a little bit of food poisoning. We were vomiting, had diarrhea.
Right.
Throughout the whole journey, I was taking my anti-malaria tablets, and they cover you about 80% usually. But now the anti-malarials were going in one way and eat out the
Straight
other,
out.
or out
no.
the same way, you know? And so I didn't have my full dose protecting me. And whilst my guide, his name was Me, always got well, me and me. Whilst me was recovering, I started to decline even more so. My health was like really sort of deteriorating. And it got to a point where, you know, I'd lie down on the floor and it took all of my energy just to get up, just to stand up and just to keep walking. It felt like similar signs and symptoms to the Gobi Desert, but it didn't make sense because I was drinking lots of water. You know, even though I had food poisoning, I was taking in there was water everywhere. And so I kind of thought I've got some form of disease, but it can't be malaria because I'm taking anti-malaria. Anyway, I had to walk with malaria for 5 days until I reached a community that had overland transport, stayed the night, woke up, felt so bad. Like that, the morning I woke up, I heard 2 voices, which was weird. Never heard this again. And that's because my brain was so scrambled. And one was pretty much saying, sleep, rest, it'll be a painless death. You won't feel anything. And the other side was screaming, trying to get my attention because I was sort of unconscious, like screaming, get up, take the overland transport, seek medical evacuation. And it was that I listened to. It was that I noticed more, and that freaked me out. And I did sit up, and I was taken then to the nearest city into a hotel because they didn't want me to go to a hospital because I did have a disease. And she took my blood. I remember collapsing on the bed, seeing 3 sort of heads spinning above me. It was really far gone at this point. And the doctor took my blood, and she came back minutes later. And in broken English, she kept saying like, "Oh, you've falciparum." I'm like, "What? You've falciparum? What?" She was like, "Malaria, you falciparum." She was like, deadliest. And I'm like, dead? And I didn't know what she was trying to tell me. She was like, malaria, deadliest. And then I really stopped bricking. And
Oh my
luckily,
goodness.
I had insurance for this one. So I had to call the insurance, and translating had to be done. And what she was saying is, you've got the deadliest strain of malaria. It usually kills you within 24 hours. And I was hiking for 5 days with it. And had you have arrived later, potentially 2-3 hours later, you would have possibly slipped into a coma.
Wow, you're right on the edge.
Right on the edge. And I think I survived 5 days because I was still taking the anti-malaria.
Right.
And so whilst it didn't cover me 80%, there was still something in there fighting it enough to just get me.
Keep
But
you alive.
had I have not listened to that voice that was screaming, like, get the fuck up, seek medical, then, you know, how long would I have delayed it for? I don't know. I could have potentially slipped into a coma at that small village that I was in.
What do you attribute that small voice to? Are you a religious, a spiritual person?
No, not religious at all. I don't know what it's down to. I don't know.
Was it your voice? Was it your mother or father's, or was it just
Subconscious, maybe?
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe it's some sort of inner survival instinct that we sort of all have. Maybe it's the gut. And when you listen so clearly, you can actually hear it and not feel it. I had something similar in the Gobi Desert. You know, bringing it back to that guy who said, incredible is the ability to continue no matter what.
Yeah.
No one's incredible. There's no such thing as incredible. But for me, when I was in the desert, I remember slowly dying under my trailer thinking, this is it. You know, this is where I die. I remember hearing that again, incredible is the ability to continue. And I was like, well, what does he mean? What does that mean? And then I thought, if incredible was a thing, what would it do? And then weirdly, in the desert, because I was hallucinating, my mind was scrambled, I could almost see something in front of me, getting it up out of its trailer, and it was breaking its goals down. It was walking 100 meters, then it was stopping to rest for 5 minutes. It was walking, and I needed a role model, right? There was nothing to look to. So I almost personified incredible, and I tried to follow in the footsteps of this thing. It's hard to explain, but it was resting. And I was resting. It was getting out quicker than me. It was walking further than me. And it was getting away, but I could see it. And effectively, I created something out there in the wilderness that potentially, you know, got me through.
Yeah.
And in a way, and I remember I messaged the guy previously who said that, And he messaged me saying, "Congratulations, you proved that it was possible. I like to think I was the angel sitting on your shoulder." I was like, "Yeah."
He's taking a bit of credit.
Yeah. But I thought maybe if those words,
Yeah.
you know,
They kept you going. Yeah.
maybe they kept me going. I do remember leaving myself a voice note as well, because people are like, "How did you motivate yourself?" And I left myself a voice note as positive Ash, you know, at home before I set off for Mongolia. And I knew that I would be in such a crazy and difficult situation when I'm in Mongolia, where I will be scared, where I will feel lonely, vulnerable, where I will be nearly dying. I was like, what voice can I hear that can sort of motivate me? And it was my own voice, but the positive voice of like, if you fail, this is what happens, compared to if you succeed, this is what you've got waiting for you. And I told myself I would never listen to that unless I needed to. And I did. I listened to it once. So maybe that email with that voice note, you know. And so bringing it back to malaria, maybe there was something again there, maybe when you're so close to dying, and you do hear stories, don't you?
Yeah.
You hear like crazy things of what happened when someone almost died, or nearly, they heard voices, or they saw something, or it's always hard to explain. Like I always feel a little bit weird talking about it because I'm so logical. You know, if there's a noise, it's not like, oh, it's a ghost, it's like the fucking window's open.
Yeah.
You know, my
Very
dad
similar
is
to
not,
us. Yeah. We talk about this a lot.
But on my travels, there's been certain things that have happened that I just can't explain.
Yeah.
And I knew that would be the case. I always said like weird shit's going to happen when I was 19, when I was thinking about traveling, always told myself there's going to be things that logic can't explain. I don't know what it will be, but like even in Madagascar with the whole witch story, do you know about that?
No.
I was so the Malagasy are extremely superstitious. Like they really believe in bad spirits and witches. You know, they made me summit the highest mountain in Madagascar carrying a white chicken, because they say the white chicken scares away the witches and the bad spirits.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm all about respecting their culture, so I took a fucking chicken named Gertrude.
Was it live or was it dead?
It was alive.
It was alive.
I had to feed it, I had to water it, I had to look after it. It became domesticated, so almost like a dog. Didn't need to tie it up. It would sleep on the top of my tent, shit on my tent, so in the next morning I'd have to clean it. But it would almost feel safe when it was in my backpack, not enclosed, just zipped up.
Like,
I think there's an image, if you type in.
Oh, yeah, can we find that?
Ash Dykes Gertrude, surely there has to
Gertrude.
be.
That's a good choice of name for sure.
Right.
Gertrude.
On images, there we go, top left.
Wow.
Right? And then this
That's
one
insane.
here, middle left, you can see what
Oh, that's a great photo.
machete in one
my
side,
God.
Chicken on the other.
And so Gertrude was effectively, they say you've got to carry him to allow you safe access to the top, but you've got to then sacrifice him on the peak. You've got to, and you don't have to kill him, but you leave him there.
Okay.
You then take a shot of rum and honey and walk back down. And the rum and honey then protects you from the bad spirits and the witches. And I was kind of like, after 2.5 weeks, Gertrude became like a little dog. He was a little pet, you know, and I was like, we shouldn't leave him. It's the cyclone season. It's the highest peak. He won't last 12 hours. But, you know, I had the guides with me and they were like, no, it's taboo. Like, I do not want to be cursed. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, so even the guides, obviously.
So even the guides were like, so we came across, a few nights before that, we came across a fucking community that wasn't on the map.
Oh, wow.
It was an unnamed, unmapped community.
Wow.
We didn't anticipate coming across like locals for at least another 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we came across locals and they were like, they welcomed us in. They gave us like a little wooden hut and they said, you can sleep here. Now that night, here's my take. I woke up in the middle of the night to Max, my guide, walking into the wooden hut out of breath with a machete in his hand. And I was like, mate, are you all right? And he was like, yeah, go back to sleep. And I went back to sleep. Now, the next morning, he's all feeling distressed and starts telling me what happened last night. And I was like, yeah, I saw you. You walked back into the hut. And he was like, yeah. So he said, me, Lever, and Suzanne, there was 4 of us all together. The 3 of us were convulsing in our sleep. And I don't remember this at all. I remember having a bad dream. And Lever and Suzanne also recall having a bad dream. But I've never convulsed in my life. He was like, yeah, you're all shaking. He looked towards the hut, and bearing in mind we're in the middle of the mountainous jungles in a unmapped sort of community. And he said during the wooden planks had slits in between, and it was the full moon, and he saw a silhouette of someone stood outside of the hut. And I'm like, right. And he was like, and she was just looking at us through like at an angle at us three, and Max shouted "Oi!" and she didn't say anything. So he got up, grabbed his machete. She ends up running off. He chases her, and he's fit guy, fast guy, you know. And when they entered the forest, she just sort of disappeared.
Wow.
And then he said he came back, and that's when he saw none of us were convulsing anymore. And you woke up, Ash, and said like, "Are you all right?" I was like, "What?" And then I said, "What?" Well, I was like, "Why weren't you slipping into a convulsion?" It was like, because Gertrude was sleeping next to him. And I'm like,
No
so
way.
me and Suzanne look at each other. Suzanne's Brazilian. She's getting scared. She's just like, "This is freaky." We're like, "Why are they talking such craziness?" And I'm like, I think they just really believe this stuff. So maybe he had a bad dream and put it down to a witch. Anyway, we're having breakfast around the fire the next morning with the locals. And around that fire, these locals start sharing witch stories of the same shit that has happened. And so me and Suzanne now look like the crazy ones because we're like, come on. And they're like, "What are you talking about, Ash?" Blah, 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 blah. So reeling out all of these witch stories and they live out in the forest. So we're like, wow. But that Suzanne didn't sleep in her own tent again for the rest of the trip. That really sort of spooked her. She's like a hardcore sort of Laura Croft style from Brazil, but she was just like having none of this. Wow. So there's stuff like that I could write off and be like, stop being stupid. But why is the tradition of carrying a white chicken, thousands of years old? Why do they believe in witches? Why is this community here unmapped? And so there's certain things that I just can't explain.
No, yeah.
And not that it's a witch, but maybe there's something there that they've not really been able to label. Some sort of weird activity going on. Strange.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah,
though.
it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really sort of opens your eyes more to, actually, it's kind of like with aliens, isn't it? Like we could sit here and be like, "Don't be silly, there's been no sign." It's like, well, yeah, there's been no sign, but what are the cave drawings from 10,000 years ago of these weird little spacecrafts leaving Earth? Why were they drawing that shit on caves?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
It's weird, right?
No, 100%.
It's you're never too sure.
Yeah.
It is good and to be open-minded about that kind of stuff as well, because I think it just makes life so much more exciting.
Yeah.
I think you can be a logical and reasonable person and be, not necessarily convinced of something enough to believe it.
Yeah.
But having just that sort of thought and having those kind of experiences as well.
Oh, yeah.
It just broadens your vision so much and just adds so much spice into your life, I feel. I love hearing about stuff like that from across the world because, there's a million different things that a million different cultures do. And
exactly.
there's always a chance that one of them is right.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If you can't explain something,
Yeah.
Yeah,
who
you
knows
never
what
know.
it really is? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I bet that's an experience like that plays on your mind then for maybe the rest of the trip. I mean, you're out there spending every night with that story fresh on your mind, having that experience.
Yeah.
Well, he left the chicken downstairs today.
Yeah, it's still here. Yeah.
It's stuck with him. Every time he does a podcast, he brings a chicken along.
I should do that. I should so do that.
Bring it in.
Just
It'd be so
sit little white Gertrude the chicken here.
And doing a shot of rum and honey at the start as well would probably be loosen you up a little bit.
All of
have
us
bit
like
more
a
fun.
shot of rum and oh my god, that would be hilarious.
That's a good tradition to have, I think.
Yeah. I'd love to start one as well. Like I feel like if I lived in one of those, like a remote region and I knew tourists came every now and then and I wasn't superstitious, I'd be like, "Listen, mate,
Yeah, I'd make
unfortunately,
something up.
you've got to
You
take
would.
this with you."
Yeah, I'd make something up for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
But that photo of you is great with Gertrude poking out one of the backpacks. Without context, that is just hilarious. Without knowing why there's just a chicken in your back.
People are like,
So funny.
people assume like it must have been his food. He
Food,
must have,
yeah,
like-
exactly.
But
No, you wouldn't believe what it's for.
Mm.
And so then going on from there, so
Yeah.
was that in the south or was that in the north at that point?
that was the north.
Okay, so that was in the north.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what were the biggest like setbacks that you experienced going across Madagascar? Like what things really stick out to you where you in the moment were thinking, "Oh, something's not right here. We should call this off."
Yeah, I think even the first couple of weeks were the most daunting because there's bandits down south of Madagascar,
Right.
and the bandits come from one side of the island to the other side to steal zebu. Zebu are cattle, and they'll take cattle, take it to the other side, and if you have zebu, you're a very rich man. And so they would steal the zebu, but they would almost see a life as like an ant. They would just be like, they would shoot up buses. They would set fire to communities, like old school, set fire to the roofs. The roofs are all like bamboo leaves and whatnot, mud huts. And so you would come across communities that are just all sort of blacked out. You can see that the huts have been set on fire, and buses just left out there. Taxi bush, it's called, like a bush taxi, and they're all just shot up, bullet holes, and so that they're down south. And my guide, I didn't realize beforehand that he was an alcoholic to begin with. So he joins, and he's fine for the first few days, but then when we get wind of the bandits, and that the military are looking for the bandits, and we kind of thought, well, let's hide in the forest. And then we realized the bandits were hiding in the forest to stay away from the military. So we were kind of like, well, who do we want to come across? The military are very corrupt and often drunk. The military, whereas the bandits are very serious and, who knows what they'll do. And my guide was worried that they would kill him, take me as ransom to get money from the government. And so his way of dealing with that was alcohol. So often I found after the fourth night, he would be drinking alcohol and crying. And I was like, you need to go home.
Yeah.
And so I did try to send him home, and we brought in someone new who could handle that situation. But that was scary, because I always say, if you see a local panic, you should definitely be panicking.
Yeah.
And seeing the stress and fear in their eyes was just like, oh shit, okay. And so anyway, cutting a long story short, that was a huge setback, because every community that we came across, we would have to ask the sheriff of the village, like, where are the bandits? What's the situation? And then they would advise us where we can and can't go. And when we bumped into the military, he saw me straight away. He was a drunken officer, AK-47.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, strap over his shoulder, and his strap kept slipping. And like he kept grabbing the gun by the trigger with the barrel pointing at me and my guide. Just remember him looking at me drunk, and he just growled at me. He gave this deep sort of growl and was like demanding in Malagasy my passport, and demanding that I go back to where I've just come from, which was like a whole marathon away. And then this group of people started to form around us. And so we've got a military officer with a gun who's threatening us, who's seen the passport, still doesn't like it, chucking at me back. And now we've got two locals in the crowd trying to break through the crowd, trying to fight me because they're drunk too, and they think I'm French. And so we've got all of this madness happening. And this was about 8-9 days in to this 155-day journey. And already I'm like, fucking hell, great.
Damn.
These guys trying to fight me. This guy's trying to shoot me. Right, welcome to Madagascar.
Yeah.
And I was advised by everyone, don't go down south. Don't go down south of Madagascar. Things happen down there, and it's really, really corrupt. And I hate saying this as Madagascar ambassador for tourism. Probably doesn't help, but they know the story, and they know that the south is bad and pretty dangerous.
Yeah. And to start your trip there,
and everyone was saying you can't. It was like, but that is the mission.
you sort of have to, don't you?
Yeah, can, otherwise, you know what? Yeah, it's the first, it's the record, it's the attempt.
So did you notice at the further north you got, it became more manageable, or
it became a different challenge. The further north I got, it was less about the people,
right?
More about the challenges of the wildlife, the jungle, and just the hunting and gathering. Just getting through. The terrain was a lot tougher up north, especially the cyclone season. Just all the rivers that we came across were now in full flow.
Wow.
And many of the rivers that we come across are, have crocodiles. So it was always a bit nervy, sort of knowing how to cross the rivers. You either cross where there's locals, but even then you can't be too sure, because the locals are always kind of saying, oh yeah, no, it's fine to cross here. We've made a deal with the croc. And I'm just like,
wow.
I'm not crossing this based on you doing some sort of handshake with a croc. Yeah.
You promised. Sorry. Just mid nibble.
How dare he?
Sorry, I
breach the
forgot.
contract.
You always do this.
Right. And so I but my guides, I always felt like the fool, unless it just wasn't translated right to me. But maybe it was their translation. But because of the superstition, they are kind of like, no, they'll leave us alone if we leave them alone. You're safe to cross here. I'm like, okay, but are they crocs? Yeah. so how is it safe to cross if there's crocs there? Because they said they're not going to attack because we're not attacking them. I'm just like, it sounds like you've done things based on luck and you think that's now how it is. It's not luck. Over time, you know, they have, and maybe there is something there. Maybe crocs do get used to seeing people and they don't go after them. But when you ask them when's the last crocodile attack and they say like last month, you're kind of like, okay, I'll find a different path to cross.
Yeah.
You know, so we would often walk upstream or downstream where there was rapids, and the crocs don't have territory near fast flowing water.
Yeah.
Or by building a raft using bamboo leaves if there's no people, no white water, which would often take hours just to get, you know, maybe 50 meters to the other side.
Oh my goodness.
And you're sort of still kicking with your legs in the water. You know?
So you could still get grabbed by a croc.
Speaking of being an ambassador for tourism, you also came out of that as an ambassador of Malaria No More UK, is that right?
Yeah.
And so what exactly do they do?
So their main aim is to eradicate malaria within our lifetime.
Nice.
So to completely
Worldwide?
clear it worldwide. And they're succeeding. They've managed to eradicate it from a number of countries.
Wow.
But it seems to be Madagascar and Africa, mainland Africa, to be most affected. I think since then they've now actually got a vaccine against malaria, I believe. And so that was great. You know, on return, when I was announced ambassador, I was then able to go into Parliament, address the UK government and try to get an increase by 20% into the Global Fund, which would have been 1.2 billion. And if successful, and as a joint effort, we were sort of going for it, it would go to help 8 million lives and cases of malaria within the next 5 years. And we succeeded.
Amazing.
Wow.
Which I think that is then in the form of anti-malaria and mosquito nets and sending camps to rural areas so people with malaria can be treated. Because it costs a cup of coffee to get the medication to eradicate malaria. But in Madagascar, some people genuinely can't afford a cup of, so they lose their life over it because they don't have a couple of quid. It's just like, fucking hell. So that was amazing. I would take the hit again, knowing that I could help play a small part of something huge and be a voice for those people who don't have a voice. You know, and you just see it. When I caught malaria, that was in the first month of the 5 months. And that's when I realized how many lives and families are sort of ripped apart because of malaria. Yeah. So it is
and that's such a great achievement to do the mission in itself, such an incredible thing, and then to have that as well when you get home,
even
to be
bigger.
Exactly.
Yeah, I always put that up there first and foremost, and then, you know, the record is that got me there. But if it's world first and this, it has to be the be an ambassador and actually fucking doing something.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah,
to be able to pair that up with missions is 100%. Just such a great thing.
And that's what I always. So in Mongolia, what I don't always talk about is I was actually raising funds for the Red Cross there.
Oh, wow.
And I was raising awareness on climate change and the effects that it has on the nomadic way of life. Yeah. So right now, not many people realize, but the winters are so much harsher now in Mongolia that the livestock can't survive the winter.
Oh, wow.
Which means the nomads can't continue their way of life.
Right.
So they move to the capital and they just live in like the felt tent, like the gurt or the yurt. And they live in one of the coldest capital cities in the world. It can drop to like minus 40 in their tent. And so they burn anything that they can to stay warm. And a lot of it's dirty coal because the clean coal gets sent to China.
Right.
And plastics. And there's now this smog that lies across the capital city. And for each newborn, the doctor advises the mother or the parents, evacuate the city, otherwise your kid will suffocate within 2 days.
Wow.
In the winter. And no one knows this.
That,
you know? So I always try to look at the bigger, but it's never really sort of one man on his mission. That's the big sort of driving force for me. But I'll always look to give back to the country that I'm traveling in, either by funds or awareness or wherever I can. It just brings like a bigger purpose to why I'm doing it, you know?
Yeah. No, that's incredible. Really is. And then, so after Madagascar, you then went, was it China after that?
Yeah, China.
Yeah. So tell us about that.
Have you been to China?
I've never been to China.
I haven't either.
Yeah, okay.
I'd love to go.
Yeah, you'd love it.
Yeah.
You'd love it because you probably would realize that there's this big sort of Western misconception of China. Because it always is, like with the politics and with governments, all of this sort of stuff, which like is bad. But China, like when people think of China, they think of Beijing, Shanghai, you know, all of these big cities. But it's fucking wild, man.
Yeah.
It is wild. Out in the West, I felt probably more vulnerable in the west of China than I did when I was alone in Mongolia.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
It was just sort of big mountains, unnamed mountains as well.
Wow.
You're on the border of like Tibet and Qinghai. So it's very sensitive. There's fucking bears there, Tibetan brown bears.
Damn.
And I sort of went with my sort of Western mentality of you leave the bears alone and the bears will leave you. And the locals are like, no.
Yeah,
That's
no.
not rubbish. Look at this photo. Look at these videos. And you're like, oh my God.
Damn.
And they're like, what do you have as protective measurement? And I'm like, a whistle? Bro, you're dead.
A whistle.
They're like, why do you have a whistle? Well, to make them aware that I'm there. And
Yeah.
so they'll obviously scatter away. It's like you'll make them aware that you're there and think, wow, yes, food, calories before torpor season. Because they're like, you're here at the wrong season, right before hibernation.
Oh no! So they're all fattening up.
They're all fat and they're coming off the mountains because it's too cold. They're going into communities. They're killing people right before torpor, their hibernation. But, you know, I don't know. I kind of listened to the West, went out there, but the locals were stating otherwise. And then they were fucking backing it up with photos and videos.
Yeah.
They sent it to my WeChat, and a lot I did delete because they were like big ass sort of grown men, mold scratches, like eating. And I'm just
So
like,
brutal.
it was like carrying this negative energy.
Yeah.
Some I did keep, some I did post on like Instagram as well.
Oh, wow.
A guy who runs up a truck with a Tibetan brown bear fucking following him. If he wasn't as agile as he was, he would have like been
Just
eaten.
gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is because in Western communities, they do say, like, you make yourself big and loud,
Yeah.
you can scare them off.
Yeah.
And so there it's just, do you think it's just those specific bears don't work like that? Or is it just in general, they're just...
I think it's just the season. Like, I think normally humans are a risk and they'll probably leave you alone. But up in that region where it can get desperate and where they're actively searching for food, they'll take a human. If they can't find like any other prey, they'll just be like, oh yes,
You're on the menu.
guy. Yeah. Like, and even the wolves try it with people as well. You know, it's you've got everything up there. So I was sort of very that was the first expedition that I questioned what I was doing. And this was so
Beforehand or during?
during the first week.
Really?
The first week. And when did you plan this? You didn't plan this in Madagascar, did you?
I had an idea of it.
Oh my goodness!
It was either I wanted to do the Congo River, source to sea, or the Yangtze River, source to sea.
Okay.
And China made more financial business sense.
Yeah.
And I just had my book translated and published across the country. So I was like, this makes sense.
Yeah.
And this is another Guinness World Record attempt, right?
Yeah.
So
this was a 4,000-mile journey to become the first person ever to hike from source to sea, the Yangtze River.
So that would be the third world first.
Yes.
For you. Yeah.
Now people know the Nile River and
Bro's getting greedy now.
Amazon.
Yeah. Save some for the rest of us.
Yeah.
Damn. We were going to do that.
Yeah, and that was pretty much the
there's our next
biggest,
vlog out the window.
Ruined.
it was pretty much the biggest thing that I could find that hadn't yet been done. You know, and I was just like, come on, this has got
That's
to
mine.
be the next.
Yeah.
But that was a mammoth journey. It took about 2 years to plan because probably of all the major rivers, I'd say the Yangtze is the most difficult logistically. Not necessarily physically, but logistically. In Tibet region, Qinghai, West China, I had to carry 14 or 16 stamped and signed laminated documents.
Wow.
They had to make me temporary Dr. Dykes for a year
Oh, wow.
to then gain access as ambassador for the Green Development Foundation, because it's only those people who can then gain access to the Three Sources National Park
See.
to get to the source of the Yangtze. So it was ridiculous. It took a long time, you know.
Yeah.
So I had to be backed by the authorities, by the government, so many different permissions just to get there. And then before we even find the source of the Yangtze River, or before we even arrived there, I lost 5 members of the team due to fear of the bears and the other wildlife, altitude sickness, injury, or just straight vulnerability.
Yeah.
Lost as in pulled out.
Pulled
Wait,
out.
because when you first said I
I
lost
thought
a
they were
member,
dead. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
No. Well, luckily...
just perished from the thought of the bears alone.
They
I
were
was
like,
like,
"Sack
crikey.
this." Yeah. And like I took a guide out there to pull me off the mountains if I got altitude sickness.
Right.
He was Tibetan. He gets altitude sickness and I need to pull him off the mountains,
way.
which puts me in the bear season. So it delayed the trip an extra few weeks. And this is why it was just a giant mess. The beginning was a giant mess. We had evacuated 5 different members before we reached day 1. And then when we reached day 1, from day 1 to day 5, bearing in mind we're at similar altitude to Mount Everest base camp, because the source of the river is like far west of China in Tibet region. And I was then pulled in 5 times by authorities within the week. And one of the times they threatened to deport me, but because I was backed up by the government of Qinghai, they had to take me back and put me back to where they picked me up from. And then I've got more people being evacuated. And then there was the threat of the bears. The winter season was closing in. And I had my team in the UK and in China saying, look, man, abort the expedition.
Yeah.
Live in the city for a year. Practice your Mandarin. We'll go again next year. And I was like, no, I believe I can get off the mountains now without it dropping into minus 40 degrees Celsius.
Oh my goodness.
Avoid the bears, avoid the wolves, you know. And at that point, don't forget my first trip, like Mongolia, definitely a lot of naivety, overconfidence, arrogance. But now, because of Mongolia, Madagascar, and the Yangtze, I now knew all of my capabilities.
Yeah.
So if the Yangtze was my first trip, 1, I probably would have died. 2, I would have listened to the team. But now I felt that I had built up the experience through track habits, through evidence, through doing these things. So I made a standpoint and I said, like, no, I'm going to continue. Had I have listened to them and bailed, COVID-19 happened the next year.
Of course.
It would have never been a thing.
Yeah.
And to try to do that same journey now, after COVID, everything's changed in China. It'd be very difficult.
Oh, yeah.
So that's another weird one of just stick to your guns.
Yeah.
Mission Yangtze would have never... And Mission Yangtze was the one that I really needed.
Yeah.
After Mongolia, I made about £3,000 in a whole year.
Wow.
Still had to live with my parents. Was not making money from a legitimate first. After Madagascar, it's nice to be able to talk about this as well.
Yeah.
Because back then I would have been like, yeah, no, I'm fine financially.
Yeah.
Made about 12 grand
Yeah.
after Madagascar. Still had to stay with my parents. I was 26 now. I need the Yangtze.
Yeah.
The Yangtze was the big kaboom that exploded things for me. And so, if I would have listened to them and bailed,
God.
who
You're in a
knows?
different place now.
I would have been back in Thailand soon after all of that. But yeah, there was a time where I did push on, and I think after 2 months, 10 members were now evacuated of the 16 different, and these were, some were soldiers, some were National Geographic videographers, some were guides. And it was at that point I remember speaking to my dad on the satellite phone and for the first time just saying, what the fuck am I doing? Why am I doing this again? 2 world firsts should be enough. Why am I doing the Yangtze? And that was his first time ever hearing me say that as well.
Yeah.
So you could almost hear, he's part of the business. You could almost hear him not knowing what to reply to that, because he's got to be careful. He can't motivate me to continue. I might die. He can't say bail because I might regret it. What do you do in a situation? You know what I mean?
That is
It's
so
like,
tough.
So what kept you going?
I think it was not, I wasn't in uncharted terrain emotionally. I'd been here before.
Yeah.
In the Gobi Desert with malaria, with the gunpoint. I'd faced scenarios, and so I had those experiences to draw back on. And, it was a lot, because I remember it being like day 20. I'm thinking I still have another 322 days left to 332 days left. That's a lot. That's for all of this to happen. And it's only been 20 days.
Yeah.
And I've got a year left of this. So I hadn't faced it in terms of nothing to this scale before of a year. But I knew that this would be the hardest section. This first 6 months would be utterly wild. I'd just be out in the wilderness, and it was intense. I was followed by a pack of wolves for 2 days at one point.
Wow.
And we didn't know, but we filmed the interaction of Tibetans warning us, do not go down there. And Kyle was filming this interaction. It made it on National Geographic as well, which is great. Filmed this interaction. We were none the wiser. Oh, thank you, bye-bye. We carry on walking. For the next 2 days, we're followed, we think maybe 5-6 wolves, by a pack of wolves that didn't get any closer, didn't get further away. They were just sort of, it's like they were watching for any signs of like injury. But anyway, fast forward 6 months, and my editor who speaks Tibetan contacted me, and she translated what the guy was saying. And he says, do not go down that valley. Only yesterday, a local was killed by a pack of wolves.
Wow.
Wow.
Oh, thank you, bye.
Yeah, just
we were none the
off.
wiser.
Wow.
So we cracked on.
It's really interesting hearing these stories and then and specific points where, say, there was a better understanding, or like if you could
Yeah.
speak the language,
Yeah.
that might be a
I had a
turning point for
translator,
you or something.
yeah.
But had you not kept going, then it would have changed the mission completely.
Right? Yeah, it would have. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just really interesting to think what could have been, you know,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah,
fact that
for
you just
sure.
kept going. And so they followed you. Say 5 days they followed you for
2 days.
2 days they
Yeah.
followed you. 5
Yeah.
wolves. Did you ever get sight of them, or?
We know that they could see us. We feel that they were on the same mountain, like the
Yeah.
same hill, but the other side.
Mm.
So each time we were dropping down, they could see us, and then we would go over, you know.
Mm.
and
So
we were
they
just
knew,
like,
yeah.
But they
I
could
think-
probably smell you from.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
just know
Yeah,
exactly
and I
where you
think
are.
they were looking for signs of injury.
Mm.
Mm.
And, it was still the beginning stages, so I was still pretty fit at that point.
Mm.
And I was with Kyle. Kyle was fit as well, so we weren't limping.
Yeah.
And I think they were looking for signs of weakness and limping. And we had a backpack,
Yeah.
made us look bigger.
She looked bigger, yeah.
It's really risky for wolves to attack a person. They just, like it happened in Canada and Alaska. It happens a lot. The grey wolves, they're big wolves. Aren't
Yeah, they are giant. When you
Yeah.
see an image of one next to even like a husky,
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to say,
Their
yeah.
heads,
they
right?
are
That's when you realise how
just
big they are.
giant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was more worried about the wolves in Mongolia because they're fucking grey wolves. They
Yeah.
are big. But the wolves in China, they were still big, and there's 5 or 6 of them that'll still fuck you up.
Yeah.
And they clearly did to a local the day before. But I don't know, I wasn't really scared with the wolves as I was with the bears. Like the bears for me, they're my fear. Like
Yeah.
tiger, lion, scary too, but a bear, what are you doing to a bear?
Huge.
Yeah.
Oh,
The
yeah.
locals would be like gifting me with a knife, and I'm just like,
Yeah. I feel like
You're
with
doing
wolves,
that.
I'd have a slight like caveman type delusion that I could somehow domesticate
yeah.
it. You know, it'd come towards me, chuck it a
Sit.
bone, and they'd be like, all right, yeah, exactly. Just sit or like roll over. But yeah, with a bear,
Oh,
just
there's no winning against a bear.
absolutely terrifying.
I think the story that scared me the most, the guy that gifted me the knife,
Yeah.
we came across his concrete hut sort of in the west. It's kind of like a picture book. You got this sort of pine trees everywhere, deep in the mountains. Hadn't come across any locals, and he's got Tibetan Mastiff. These Tibetan
Right,
Mastiffs
yeah.
are like big furry dogs
Huge.
that protect the livestock from wolves, bears, and snow leopards. And he said that only 2 weeks ago, this is why he gave me the knife, a bear walked into his little courtyard, walked past his Tibetan Mastiff, which was staked in the ground. This Tibetan Mastiff was barking, but it just was unfazed and was fucking scratching at his steel door, trying to break into his hut.
Oh my God.
I'm like, what did you do? And he was like, he put himself in like a little kitchen cupboard and just stayed in the kitchen cupboard. And I was like, how long did that last? He said, about 20 minutes. Just scratching, trying to break down. It could smell something. Maybe it could smell him. Just trying to break through the door. And then I'm there realizing I'm in a tent
I'm in a tent.
without a Tibetan Mastiff.
Yeah.
You know, and that, it was an accumulation of all of these stories that made me think like, okay,
Yeah.
it is
This is serious.
dangerous. Because a lot of stories you hear, which is also true, is the biggest attacks happen from when a local is sort of out farming and they accidentally come to the top of the mountain or around a tree and accidentally scare a bear, and the bear gets defensive and attacks. And I thought that was the case, hence the whistle. If it hears me, it's going to leave. It's going to be like there's a person, you know, I don't want anything to do
yeah.
with the person, and it'll bounce. But the locals were not only telling but showing me otherwise.
Yeah.
And it was all of these stories that I kind of went from being absolutely fine with it on day one, like, yes, fine, we'll just be, we got an air horn, we got a whistle, to then being like very hyper alert and 100% scared of the bears.
Yeah.
Up to a point that only 2 years ago, when I was filming my latest show following the Great War, I've not said this on a podcast actually, I don't think, but we came
Exclusive, come on.
across. Yeah, well, it's a story I always forget, but it's a story that made me realize, okay, that's how dangerous it is. I came across a wildlife expert because he was part of this show, who was also part of a Ray Mears show, Wild Tibet. And they were looking to camp, but in the West of Tibet whilst they were filming. But the first thing Ray Mears, first thing he asked was like, "Are there bears in this region?" And Teru was like, "There are, and we do have to be careful of the bears." He was like, "What kind of bears?" He was like, "Tibetan brown bears." He's like, "Okay, I'm not camping." And Ray Mears didn't camp in the tent because of the fucking bears.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's when I realized that was pretty stupid, because he's a wild man, isn't he? He's like an ultimate sort of survivor. He knows like what to eat, what not to eat, the wildlife. And when I heard that he just did not want anything to do with the bears out there, and yet I was camping every night out there, I was just like, what?
For a year as well.
You seem so down to earth. If I had done all this stuff and like army men were dropping out, Ray Mears wasn't doing it, my head would be massive.
Yeah.
I
In the
think a
clouds.
big pro is finding out afterwards, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like
that's
with
true.
the
Yeah.
Wolf they killed a person.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Okay. But you're right. You know, my mum and dad are surprised by that. They're kind of like, every time you come back, they do expect me to suffer with some sort of PTSD or be scarred mentally, because I have seen some shit, some horrific things as well. And I've been in horrific situations. But I don't know, for some reason, I just come back and I think I don't forget the negatives. I almost learn from the negatives, but put the positives on a higher pedestal.
Yeah.
And it's the positives of a previous trip that I look into that motivates me to go after the next. Whereas if I dabble too much with how close I was to dying, maybe that's enough to put me off going for the next. And then because of all of that I've experienced, and I look at the highs as well as the lows, I think that lifts my spirits more than dampens them from the shit that did happen when I was in these countries. And so it's important. I've got to keep that. I think maybe it's drilled into me now. Maybe that is me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, and maybe because I volunteer, because I'm going out, I'm doing this. It's not like if I'm at war and I'm forced to do it, I get put on the line. I see my friends being shot. You know, so it's also totally different in that regard too.
Yeah.
But
It's a great mindset to have, and it's sort of necessary for what you do, I feel like,
I
as
think
well.
so.
Oh yeah. You're
Otherwise-
just physically and mentally built different, and you
Yeah.
couldn't not be to do this
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of stuff.
Do you think there's like a drive inside of you? Do you feel it when you come back, you're
Yeah.
like, I need to do the next mission. I need to go out and do something. Do you feel that, or is it?
Yeah, I think so. It's not something that I would say that I'm necessarily addicted to, because I find that when I'm back, I really sort of live the luxury, comfortable life.
Yeah.
You know, I like my business class. I like my 5-star, and I like to be well looked after.
Yeah.
Whereas if I was too much of like, oh no, I don't need a hotel, I want to just camp, I want to go economy, then, and that's absolutely fine too. But I think that's being obsessive about one specific thing. And I always kind of say that what's more important than being a survivor is being an adapter, being able to adapt. You know, if I'd kind of rocked up here and I was barefoot, shorts, you know, you'd just be a bit like, oh, that's cool, but I wouldn't ever sort of get him in a suit to present to MasterCard or like a corporate company. You know, so it's kind of having the best of both worlds and being able to adapt. And that's what I love as well. I sort of feel an urge that when I'm back in civilization and I find myself getting impatient because of queues or, you know, certain things that water's taken too long to heat up when I want a shower. I'm kind of like, I need to go back to the fucking wild.
Yeah.
You know, I need to recalibrate, because when you do come back from the wild to civilization, you do appreciate everything and you take very little for granted. You know, like you even watching the kettle and you're like, fuck, kettle's going to boil, but it's going to stop itself.
Yeah.
It's not going to overboil. How crazy is that?
Yeah.
Whereas out in the bush, you've got to watch it the whole time.
Yeah.
You've got to be on it, like the toast. You just pop it down. It's going to ping up. It's like, this is great.
Do you have the itch? Because I mean, the only other time I've heard people speak in this kind of way is when you hear people that sort of do like tours, like when people are like, oh, I did a tour of Afghanistan and coming home was great.
Yeah.
But like they almost get addicted to that constant level of almost like stress and adrenaline. Do you find yourself when you are, you know, at times you might appreciate the kettle boiling, but do you sit there sometimes and just go, I'm itching to just get back because I'm currently just watching this kettle boil and I'm just, you know, I've got this itch to just be in a situation again where it's life or death and it's all go like, because it's unbelievably going from 5-star hotels and business class to
It's like highs and lows.
Yeah,
isn't
it's
it?
absolutely high and low. Are you sort of addicted, would you say, to this sort of? Because I mean, now's probably a good time for us to move on to the fact that you are doing another one. You've got another one planned.
Yeah.
So you at
It's
the
a very
moment,
good
what's
question.
driving you to do a fourth one?
Yeah. I think
What are you doing?
Hear the panic in my voice. After everything you've been through.
You're not
stay
going,
still.
don't worry.
Yeah, stay home. Yeah, you know what? It's a number of things. I think maybe there is that slight addiction, not necessarily addiction to danger or death, just addiction to something new and breaking away from that routine. But there's also the career aspect. Like this is what pays the bills. You know, it's kind of like how people get stuck into a job they don't like, but they have to do it because they need money. Luckily, I've got stuck in something that I do like and it makes me money. But it is a case now where I'm looking at how do we taper it down, whereby the expeditions are just as ambitious, just as cool, but they're not 352 days long, you know, because I can't be away from my girlfriend for like a whole year. Because, well, it's selfish, isn't it? So for me,
You've just broken 1,000 hearts, at least, by the way, saying you have a girlfriend.
Yeah.
All the women watching this have all this basically like Action Man, but
Missed out
10
on the
times
lonely
hyped
snow
up, and
leopard.
like,
Yeah.
no, he's taken.
Yeah, but pretty much I am looking at how I can just keep it as extreme, but taper it down. And I would love to do more TV shows.
Yeah.
Because the Great Wall one that I did, no one really knows that because I had to keep it quiet on social media because TV wanted exclusivity.
Right.
But that was a 21,000 kilometer. It wasn't a world record, but it was safety in numbers. It was like a whole film crew of 16. I was the main host presenting a 6-time 1 hour international TV show.
Yeah.
So that's the direction that I would love to sort of veer into so that I don't have to actually just go out into the wild, self-film and see what happens on completion.
Yeah.
So this one now, this next one, we're doing a mix of TV and social, but my main focus is social media.
Yeah.
I think that's where it is now. Like I said, with that mini Mongolia series,
Yeah.
I over doubled of what Channel 4 could do
Yeah.
on one platform.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right? It's like 10 years ago, that would not be a thing, or maybe for the minority of people on YouTube and whatnot. But so I think I would love to share these journeys more, keep doing what I'm doing, not risk my life as much. But you know, you've got people like Mike Horn, who is in his 60s. He's a fucking savage, absolute badass. You know? He had a polar bear sit on him in the North Pole. He had circumnavigated the world via both poles, north and south, using no motorized vehicles whatsoever. He swam the Amazon River. He was bitten by a spider, and he was like, "Damn it, this is killing me," because he started hallucinating. But he didn't know what's. Sorry, it was a snake. Didn't know what snake it was. So he just guessed and being like, he tied up, sort of what's it called? Put like a lace around him to cut off the circulation. Giving himself anti-venom based on the most common snake that he saw, recovered, threw it away, carried on swimming the Amazon.
Oh my
Insane.
god!
And he's like late 50s, 60s now. I don't want to go that deep in terms of, I'm glad that I did my shit younger rather than older, whereas he did his stuff more older rather than younger. But it's finding that balance.
Yeah.
So yes, the addiction's there, but the addiction's there because everything keeps growing.
Yeah.
You know, each expedition you do, you get now anyway, you're rewarded in kind by different sort of ways of living, finances, events. You get to also travel to high kudos events internationally, and I love travel. That's my passion.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can't be, risking
Yeah.
not too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Still got to be a risk element to it.
Yeah. Exactly.
So do you want to tell us about this? So you're off to one of the last truly wild places left on Earth.
Yeah.
Tell us all about it.
So the next place, I will be going to the Amazon in South America, to a country called Suriname. And Suriname is, as you mentioned, is possibly one of the least explored countries in the world. And I still don't really fully know why people don't really go there. I think if you're going to go to South America, you go to Brazil or Peru or Bolivia, right?
Yeah.
So Suriname gets overlooked. However, Suriname has more trees per square kilometer than any other country in the world. And it's the greenest country on the planet.
Yeah,
So
I saw the stat is 90.2% of it is
covered by
covered.
It's just
by-
wild.
Yeah.
And there's only like
Covered by
600,000 people living there.
Wow.
And the high majority of them live in the capital, in Paramaribo. And so it just means that jungle in Suriname is practically uncharted.
Yeah.
People are still coming across things that are unnamed, unmapped, and we possibly might. So this attempt, we've got Guinness Book of Records involved. Again, this will be 3 world records that we're going for.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So it will be the first to kayak source to sea of the Coppename River. And the source, we might be the first to map the source. There's no evidence to suggest that the source has really been found and mapped, only vaguely by satellite, which the satellite's incorrect, but it's like thereabouts, but because it branches off. Expeditions were taken there in the 1800s to try to map the western part, but they only got so far west before they needed to leave because people were dying of diseases, wildlife, etc. People have been on the Coppename River, have kayaked the Coppename, but not from source to sea. So that's what we want to go for and try to map. Now, whilst we're doing that, we want to attempt the fastest team up the highest mountain in Suriname and the fastest team up the second highest mountain in Suriname. Now, there's been more people out in space than have been to the peak of this mountain. Just such a remote,
that is crazy,
isolated mountain. Yeah. And so, it's going to be about 50 days long.
Yeah.
So not a year long, but the intensity is ramped right up.
Massive, yeah.
We don't even know how we're going to get to the beginning in terms of we don't know where we're going to land, the helicopter. So we get by helicopter, fly west, and we'll be looking out the window for a place to land. Now, if there's nowhere to land, we'll have to hover the helicopter above deep water, 5-6 meters, and we're going to have to individually jump into the Coppename River.
That alone is insane.
That is insane. I kind of had an idea. I was kind of like, can we not, because I've got my skydiving licenses.
Right.
I'm like, can we not drop in? I just jump from the helicopter, fucking skydive to the mountain. But the mountain's like covered in jungle too.
So it's just
So,
impossible
no
to
chance.
land.
Yeah.
And so the first thing you're doing, is it mapping the source? Is that first on the agenda, or?
The first, I believe, we're going to kind of have to see when we get there. But I think it will be a summit of the highest mountain first, which will still be dropped off quite a distance away from the base of the mountain.
Yeah.
So we'll have to navigate upstream and then go for the attempt of the fastest summit. And then on the way down or around that area, we'll have to then start searching for the source. We know roughly where we think it might be, but the last people to have gone there around that area have been like, look, good luck. Like the source is very hard to find.
Yeah.
And so, that's going to be a tricky one. And then we find the source, and then we kind of follow the source down the Coppename, summit the second highest mountain, which is Table Mountain.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that we don't need ropes for this, but it's kind of like, as you can imagine, it's just rocks either side and then flat on top. And then we go back down to the Coppename. And a lot of it will be paddle in one hand, machete in the other, because a lot of it will be forest just covering the river. So we will be portaging the kayak a lot of the time. Where we'll have to probably get out of the river, hike back on the river, kayak. Hunting will probably be piranha at nighttime with the machete, just kapow, hit the river, pull up the piranha. And they're big, their piranhas are like this big out there. I always kind of had in mind they were this big. But,
so low. I thought they'd be quite small.
Yeah,
big.
They're big piranhas.
Yeah.
And so you've got the piranhas, you've got the caiman, you have got the stingray, the electric eel, you've got the jaguar, you've got the puma, you've got the snakes, you've got the spiders. And so whilst it's 50 days, which is still intense for a jungle, like we have to watch our footing the whole time. We've been warned about the stingray in the Coppename. There's going to be a lot of stingray. And they could potentially be, weirdly enough, because I thought jaguar came in, but they're like, you don't see the stingray.
Watch out for the stingray, yeah. That's insane.
An evacuation will be by helicopter, but we need to allow at least 6 hours to 24. If there's a storm, potentially 48.
Of course, yeah.
So and I think that's going to be quite surreal. Once we're dropped by the helicopter, if we find a place to land or whether we jump, when we hear that helicopter leave and the sound of the chopper will just be replaced by the noises of the jungle.
Yeah.
And we see evacuation disappearing. That's going to be surreal. That's going to be like, this is it,
You're
boys.
alone then.
Are you a big lover of sort of science and nature then? Like being, when you're dropped off there are you one of those people that is just mesmerized by different types of animals and different biomes and stuff?
Yeah, I think to be surrounded by all of that and to be in it. I'm not the type that like bird watching. I don't, nothing like that excites me. But the thought of being in one of the last purest jungles out there and just be part of this whole sort of jungle that is this living, breathing life and death cycle of everything is there to defend itself and not necessarily out to get you, but everything is there. It's you're surrounded by life and death. Is what I would probably best say it as. Isn't that there's more life per square kilometer in the jungle than anywhere else in the world, but not only that, anywhere in history, like now at this point.
Wow.
So it's weird to think that you'll just be part of
That.
the jungle.
Just everything trying to survive.
And that's an important thing as well. You'll have to also become one with the jungle and start learning quickly of what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
Like even plants, one way is smooth, but you brush the other way and it can take your skin
Tears
off.
you up,
Because
yeah.
it's there to protect itself.
Yeah. And in a place like that where barely any people have gone, like you said, there's going to be a lot that just isn't known.
Yeah.
So you could come across plant species or animal species that are just
That are undiscovered.
100%.
Yeah. And no doubt we will be walking past a lot of wildlife, especially the smaller wildlife, especially insects that are undiscovered, but we just won't know it yet.
Won't know,
Yeah, of course.
Which is crazy. And what is insane is there's two lads out there who live in Suriname who are coming with us. They're wildlife experts and snake handlers. And they said what you'll find is when you're out there, you'll come across wildlife that haven't seen a human before and they won't know how to take you. They'll be curious. So they're on a boat and they've got video footage of like snakes or caiman swimming up to a boat because they're like, what is this?
Yeah.
What are you?
Haven't been scared off by.
They don't know to
anything
run.
either.
They don't know to attack. They're curious. They're like, what is that?
Oh, freaky.
That's
It's
crazy, isn't it?
freaky.
I love
Really
that.
crazy.
When they told me that, I got goosebumps. I was like,
Yeah.
oh man.
That is
Especially in the
insane.
21st century.
Yeah.
You don't.
So you don't really expect this stuff. I mean, like Suriname, it's the first time I've even heard of it.
Right.
The fact you're doing this
For many
expedition.
people, it will be.
Yeah. And so you don't really think there's a place out there that is so wild.
Yeah.
The animals, some you might not even know exist. And the ones that do live there don't even know what a human is. Yeah. It's just such a crazy thought.
It's crazy. It is bizarre.
And then even when you're out there, because it's so wild and the jungle is so dense, it's not a case of like, say something bad happens, you can get extracted like that. Like you said, if there's a storm, you've got to wait for the chopper to be able to come in. But then it's a case of getting to a point where you can get extracted as well.
Yeah.
Because I imagine just everywhere you look will just be jungle.
Exactly. Yeah, it will be. It's going to be difficult, I think, to get by. And like even camping out there, it's hammock from tree to tree. We'll just be sleeping in the hammock for like anywhere from 40 to 50 days. And even that, because sleep is important, right? And you're kind of out there in nature at one. You'll be sort of understanding what you can and can't do. You'll be learning what's what. You'll be getting used to the daily slog of the journey. You'll have a routine whereby, you just crack maybe a wolffish, piranha on the head. That'll be your main source of protein.
Yeah.
But then at nighttime, when you're in the tent and all of these noises and it's really active, like there was a story from the last guys who were on the Coppename River. They had a jaguar walk into their camp and it took a duffel bag, dropped it like 50 meters later. But just to know that whilst they were there sleeping, they woke up to a jaguar in camp.
Oh my goodness.
And Paul Rossley, he's like the Amazon guy, his stories are crazy. He said that he was in a hammock, but he woke up to breathing on the side of his face. And he didn't know what it was straight away. So he lifted his arm up. And as he lifted his arm up, the jaguar growled. He was just saying like, fucking put your arm back down. Wow. And he just paused. And then it growled. And then it just walked off. And it's like, so he's there sleeping. He's got a jaguar just staring at him,
Oh
sniffing
my goodness.
It's not-
If you get a clip like that, that is,
crazy,
you are
wouldn't
going
it?
astronomical. Yeah.
That would be
Do you think
insane.
the jaguars are getting so close because, like you said, they've never seen a human before? They're trying to figure out what you are?
Yeah,
Or,
potentially that, or potentially they'll just smell something from camp and they'll come over and suss it
investigate.
out, see if there's anything interesting. Maybe they'll smell the remains of the piranha that we're eating,
Yeah.
which we've got to be careful of, because another story with Paul Rossley was that he left the remains of a fish that he'd eaten on the riverbank, like close to his tent. He was sleeping on the riverbank, and he woke up in the middle of the night to go for a wee, and he took his torch and he flashed, and he just saw like 16 pairs of eyes just staring, and it was all caiman, crocodile, coming for the fish.
Yeah.
But they weren't there to attack him. Although that's scary, you would just see all of these
eyes,
you know, you'd be like, oh shit. He said they were almost like little puppy dogs assessing to see if it was clear to get closer to the fish, because they could smell it and they want it.
Yeah.
But they're like, what's that in the tent? What's
That's
a human?
nuts, isn't
You
it?
know, it's just like, wow.
And the fact that he didn't know there was just
Yeah.
eight caiman right there.
Yeah. And just to go for a wee, climbing out of the hammock, you've got to look at where you're standing.
Oh yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's like-
everywhere.
So that's why I feel the intensity's ramped up. There's 4 of us, which is good. But I think my biggest worry is one of us just makes a mistake and the jungle makes us pay.
Yeah.
It's one of those,
It
isn't
is
it?
a numbers game. I mean, the more you do this, you do them groups of people, like there's always a risk. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
And so far, you know, touch wood, everyone has been evacuated safely.
Yeah.
No one's died on my watch. And it needs to be kept that way. And I'm sure this will be absolutely fine as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, even with myself, I just need to make sure that I'm not overconfident with Mongolia, Madagascar, and the Yangtze, that I go in there a little bit ill prepared, because it's fine, I'll learn on the go. And that's why I kind of like mixing up the terrains as well. Whilst I faced jungle in the north of Madagascar, I've never faced jungle to this extent.
Yeah.
And so I think if I was just strictly a desert explorer or strictly a jungle explorer, you're probably going to get overconfident and start forgetting about the little details because you're used to it, and that's when mistakes happen. But I'm always changing it from extreme cold to high altitude mountains to hot deserts, now to jungle.
Yeah.
So it keeps you on edge, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And what do you have like a start date that you drop in?
Yes.
Yes. When's that exactly?
So I fly on the 20th of August.
Okay.
From the UK to Suriname.
Yeah.
Spend a good 9 days sort of snake handling, getting familiar with the environment, maybe top up my jungle survival knowledge whilst I'm there.
Yeah.
And then on the 29th, as a team, there's 4 of us all together.
29th.
Yeah, we look to fly in and we search for that
that's
landing
soon.
space.
That's so
That's
soon.
too soon, isn't it? What's
Wow.
that, 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks?
Yeah.
yeah, not far off.
That
So
is
it's,
very soon.
Yeah.
And you said, so you're documenting a lot of this on social media.
Yes.
Are you going to be doing like day 1, day 2 on YouTube, like
Yeah.
longer videos?
Yes, so maybe not on YouTube, more on Instagram and TikTok. We're
Yeah.
going to do day 1,
Yeah.
day 2, following it through, and then we're also going to be capturing for TV in the hope that we can, sell,
Yeah.
get a commission
Absolutely.
afterwards.
Yeah.
But if not, we definitely want to put
That'll,
together a
yeah.
multi-episode on YouTube as
Yeah.
well.
So that'll be so interesting to watch.
That would
And I
be
know
Yeah, I can't wait to
everyone
keep up with
listening
this.
will want to know exactly
Yeah,
where
hopefully.
they can be watching this.
Yeah,
Keep up
I
with
hope
it.
so. If I can build up the traction, because this is my
Yeah.
first time doing this,
Yeah.
in terms of socials.
Yeah.
So it's always really been TV, and TV want you to hold back the footage. So it has stumped the growth on social media 100%.
Yeah.
Because if I could air Mongolia, Madagascar, and the Yangtze for a whole year,
Yeah.
that would have
Yeah.
been immense.
Yeah.
So this is my first time sort of doing this. And if I see the support there online,
Yeah.
that's the direction I think I'll probably take in the future.
Yeah.
Less reliant on TV, more for socials, because there's demand.
Yeah. Yeah. Big
So
time.
we've got the satellite communications, but it's a case of hopefully it works. The lads are saying it works. It's via Sat and Global Sat. It is. And if it works, fuck, that'd be amazing.
Oh, it
Yeah,
will be
well,
From the
amazing.
jungle, like
I'll be
posting
tuning in
out.
every day.
Oh, I'll
for
be
sure.
tuning in every
Oh,
day.
We'll drop all the
appreciate that,
links to
lads.
his social media in the
Appreciate that.
description.
Yeah,
exactly.
And we'll run through your socials at the end, but I think we've still got a few more questions.
Oh yeah, because
Yeah, man.
I want to find out about you
Yes.
and why you got into this sort of stuff. Like, what
Yeah.
was it that made you want to do it? Is there anything you attribute in your childhood or growing up that makes you more inclined to doing this sort of stuff, or did you just stumble across it and then that's who you are now?
I think I would probably say I stumbled across it, but there's probably reasons to suggest otherwise. I think when I was younger, so first of all, I had a very sort of normal upbringing, very normal. My parents were always very supportive. They were like, if you want anything in life, you've got to work hard for yourself. And we were on a small coastal town. It's not a very wealthy coastal town, but it was a very happy childhood. With my older sister, got a younger brother now. Normal school, went to college, and it was in college that I felt there was something there where I was doing an outdoor education course, And I found when it came to the physical activities, I realized I was more of a kinesthetic learner.
Yeah.
I learned so much more from hands-on practical experience, making mistakes and learning from the mistakes than I did in the classroom. In the classroom, I'd get fidgety. I'd be like, I'm not learning anything here, dude. I need to be out doing stuff, learning from experience. So that is when I realized, okay, I learn through experience. And then I've always been very competitive. So before all of the adventures came about, I was very sporty. Athletics, played football, played rugby, you name it. It was always in the sports teams. And so I think it was my love for the competition and for the sort of physical activity mixed with the curiosity of watching David Attenborough shows and being like, this is so cool, but I don't want to watch it from the living room. I want to get out there and amongst it.
You want to be living it.
I don't want to just look at a dolphin. I want to touch a dolphin. It was always that when I was younger. And then to top that up even more so, and I don't know if it's in my DNA, but I've got a granddad who's a wild man. I've only probably seen him 5 times in my life. So it could be in my DNA where he's lived in Pakistan for 21 years, overstayed his visa by 15, I think it is.
Wow.
Yeah, got to such a point. He's a poor man, has no money, so he was living on someone's roof because the roofs are flat. So he had like a shed on a roof that he lived in.
Goodness.
And then he's been kicked out of Pakistan because they realised, well, we can't punish him. We can't demand money because he has no money. Get the fuck out. So he lives in India now, like a small desert region. And he is kind of like a natural born survivor. Some of his stories are just insane.
Yeah.
And although I have only met him 5 times, whilst I disagree, I'm open to the fact that maybe his stories rubbed off on me.
Yeah.
Or maybe his DNA skipped a generation of being passed on. Because he's got a lot of he's a wild man.
Yeah.
Just a survivor.
I wouldn't doubt that there's a lot of, because there definitely is, like science definitely does say that a lot of mental fortitude and that kind of stuff, resilience.
Yeah. So
all those kind of things are like in no small part genetic. So that doesn't surprise me at all to hear that you've got something
potentially
like that.
right.
It sounds like it's in your blood.
Yeah. What do your parents do?
So my mum works in Chinese medicine, funnily enough. So she's an acupuncturist.
Oh.
And my dad, he's driving instructor now, but he's done lots of jobs from financial advisor, mortgage consultant, now a driving instructor. And he's pretty much full-time as well with me with all of this. So when
that's cool.
Yeah, when it started after Mongolia, we were kind of like, I told him, look, there's a career here. For me, a world first, it's like winning a gold medal. I was like, there's something that can be done here. And whilst he was maybe a little bit skeptical at the beginning, when the talk started coming in and when there was a TEDx talk and, the money wasn't there, but things were happening.
Yeah.
And then he came on board because I couldn't afford PR. I didn't have an agent. Agent wouldn't take me serious. And then I did Madagascar and it kind of started to evolve and build. And so me and him, he's kind of like a big brother. We kind of we're always in. And whilst things have changed and I've got bigger teams, he's still sort of a solid part of that, which is really nice.
That is really
great.
nice. Yeah. That is great. It's great to have someone you can really trust as well.
Especially
who's
navigating
there for your
something like
best
this.
interest.
Yeah,
exactly.
Loads of the YouTube lot do it. They sort of get their mums and dads to come in and whether it's run their merch or be essentially their agent.
Yeah.
A lot of footballers do it now as well. You're a football man?
Not as much. But
The Welsh football teams, I guess, aren't.
Well, I was saying not as much, even though like last month I played England versus Wales. It was a celebrity charity game.
Oh, no way.
We beat England 2-0.
No.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was in Swansea.
Right, let's wrap up this podcast. Wrap it up.
Yeah. So I love playing it.
Yeah.
I love playing it. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I just struggle to just sit and watch for 90 minutes unless it's a good game. Like I watch the finals, of course.
Yeah.
I'm the same, to be honest.
Yeah.
I prefer to play something than watch it. Yeah.
And I don't know what I was expecting from your personality, but I think when you hear of someone that's so hardened and traveled like this, that, I almost imagine a very, almost like emotionless, stoic, almost like just like a survival machine that's a robot. And you are very personable, which is a cool like mix of it, especially if you're going to do the social media side. You could be, if you're spending 50 days in South America, but you're really boring or just an arsehole.
Yeah, no emotion.
A lot of people would be like, I don't want to shoot, but being a very personable guy, and I'm sure it will help you on your travels. I mean, if you'll get to sticky situations. Because especially you were saying with Madagascar, with their French rule, Suriname's got a legacy of Dutch colonial rule, right?
Yes.
So do you have to make sure, have they said you've got to make sure people don't think you're Dutch, or were they
No, I don't think
culturally a little bit different?
Yeah, different. Maybe the communities inside are different. I've not educated myself fully on the communities within in terms of how they would perceive a white person. But I know that Dick Locke and Matthew Wallace, the sort of survival expert, the wildlife experts out there, I don't think they have ever faced any trouble with the locals. But you're right, in some places it has been a case of, smiling, showing that you're jovial, non-threatening, and people are more willing to help out and give water or food.
Yeah, because you can imagine someone who's got a bit of an ego and a bit like, I'm a hard man, I'm not scared by you. It can almost like escalate it more.
Yeah, 100%.
And in Suriname, are you expecting to come across many people, or do you think it's going to be completely wild?
Yeah, the lads out there, from their experience, have said they don't think we will come across many communities at all.
Yeah.
Is there any possibility of an uncontacted tribe far? That's the big thing I'd be curious about.
Yeah, I have asked them that. They say they don't know. And I'm like, do you...
That's so cool.
Like, elaborate on I don't know. And they said they've never come across anything, but then I don't believe they've been this far west before. They've never done the highest peak and gone to the source. And then I said, is there any evidence to suggest there might be just tribes living out there? Because that's more sort of Bolivia and Peru, like the corridor there. And he said, he got thinking, he was like, and I'm like, what's that? And he was like, there was a community that live in the jungle that people are aware of. And they've mentioned an uncontacted tribe sometimes coming closer and coming in and causing havoc.
Wow.
I'm like, okay, would you put that down as then there maybe is uncontacted tribes? And he was like, no, I wouldn't personally. I was like, why? He was like, because I've not seen them. Okay, so I get it. But, and then I said, is there reason for them to lie? Or like to be superstitious, maybe like the Malagasy? He was like, no. I'm like, okay. It was like, and then he said he came across a dugout canoe once on the riverbank. I'm like, right, what's wrong with that? It's like, all the communities there, they don't make their own canoes. They're still connected.
Right.
They have canoes like taken to them. There's always like little airstrips. We're not talking deep interior, but surrounding Paramaribo, small airstrips. A dugout canoe is something only a really sort of indigenous community would be. And I was like, how old did it look? He was like, it looked fairly new, and they had been on that river only 2 months before, and it wasn't there. And he was like, they don't know where that came from. Like, fucking hell.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Who knows?
Potentially scary.
Yeah. Well, because like you said, in Madagascar, you came across an unmapped community. So there is a big chance that you could, every chance that you could come across something like that.
I think so, yeah.
Do you have like plans in place in case it's like a hostile tribe or community?
Yeah, so we do want to avoid them at all costs. We don't want any sort of interaction. We believe they're out there, they should be left alone. Yeah. And if there is any signs, we will be sure to avoid that. Yeah. Because of course, if we have anything as well, we don't want to pass on any potential viruses or diseases. Yeah. And so the aim is to always avoid. And along the Coppename River, there's no evidence to suggest that there is any tribes. Yeah. So I'm like 99% sure we will not see any other communities.
We were actually just having a bit of a laugh before the podcast started, weren't we? About, what was it, Laura? Did you pull it up? A tribe. That were absolutely infatuated by Prince Harry.
Yeah. It was one of the royals. Yeah. Was it Prince Harry? It was Prince Philip. Oh right, yeah, they've just had a mourning period.
Laura, can you pull them up really quickly? The Prince Philip tribe.
And I assume this was a tribe that had never seen a white man before, or Prince Philip had visited them. And the Castan people.
A religious sect as well.
Wow. And so they sort of worshipped him.
So So Prince Philip, he was taken to this community, was it? And that was their first time seeing a white person in real life.
Click on that Wikipedia one. It's the photo on the top left.
Because I remember this story from a while ago, and I think it was something like that. And I just found it bizarre. But then I think if I was in that position as that tribe, never seeing someone like that before, you would think, whoa, what is this? Yeah. You know, and that could happen to you in Suriname.
You know what? That happened in Madagascar.
Really?
None of this, no worshipping, but I did come across a community that had never seen a white person before. Wow. And it was translated. I remember asking so many questions, and we filmed it as well.
That's really
There
cool.
was also another community we could see them in the distance on the other side of the hill, and we were lost. So we're like, perfect, we can ask them for directions. We could see them all there. But they could obviously see us too. By the time we arrived, they scurried out, boom, hid in the bush.
Yeah.
They were gone, wanted nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
And apparently they're like that with any Malagasy living on the coast as well. If they venture up, it's like they want zero contact.
Wow.
So they weren't coming. They could see us, but we couldn't see them, and they weren't coming out the bush. Wow. In the 21st century.
That's incredible.
So this is it, just for people who are curious about the Prince Philip movement. It's on Vanuatu. And apparently, according to ancient tales, the son of a mountain spirit travelled over them. The people of the area had seen the respect accorded to Queen Elizabeth II by the colonial officials and concluded that her husband, Prince Philip, must be the son referred to in their legends. And so it's a full religious sect.
Wow.
So there could be, in a year's time, a religious sect dedicated to you.
Imagine if you
In
come
Suriname,
across
who knows?
an uncontacted tribe and they see you for the first time.
Oh shit!
Wow, that's so
That
interesting.
This could happen.
Crazy though, isn't it?
Yeah,
Jeez.
cool.
And that kind of just shows that these tribes who haven't been exposed to the outside world or whatever, you do have to be careful with how you interact with them, and like you said, you've got plans in place so you don't interfere and stuff like that. And that's so important to do that and respect culture like you have been.
Yeah.
Because I mean this is funny to look at, but in reality it's quite a crazy thought to think that's changed their whole
It's almost a
existence.
little bit of a shame as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because what was it before Prince Philip?
Exactly.
You know,
And
and
now it's sort
is
of-
that lost forever now?
Yeah.
Have they forgot what their original belief was, and who did they previously worship? Or, but then maybe it gave them direction and it brought the community.
True.
And we don't know, do we?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's better not knowing.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the is it Senetal? Is it North Senetal?
Oh, yeah.
Island in
North
just
Sentinel.
off India. It's the most protected place in the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
More so than Nasser, I believe,
Wow.
because they don't want anything to do with any outsiders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've tried again and again and again. There was even a missionary that went out there, right, to try to introduce Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they were like, "Oh, if I can introduce you to Jesus,"
Yeah.
and pull their bows.
And they
and-
did.
Yeah. They,
You know?
they
I
died,
remember
didn't
seeing
they?
that actually. Yeah.
And there were even fishermen in the distance, 2 different boats, 2 different times, came a little bit too close to the island, and they reached them with their bow and arrows.
Yeah.
Have you seen the plane that's flown above that has the arrows underneath?
In the Amazon.
I think it. I
Is
don't
it
know whether it's.
Senetal?
I don't know whether it's
I
that
think
island or Amazon.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Laura,
Yeah.
pull it up really quickly. Just type in like plane with arrows underneath island or something. It'll probably come up. There's enough SEO terms for it, I'm
Plane
sure.
flying over tribe.
Yeah, and just sort of
There
just
you go.
must have come so close to get absolutely peppered.
Whoa.
There we go.
That is
There you
when
go.
you
This
say
is-
peppered.
Yeah, I mean that is.
Oh, what? I've not seen that before.
It is just riddled with them. Click on one of the articles and see
Shit.
Wow.
and see where it's from. But yeah, for our audio
Oh
listeners,
my
there's
God.
a plane with just an abundance of arrows from the underneath, whether it's real or
In
not.
the Amazon. Yeah, there you
It
go.
was the Amazon, was it?
I've not seen that.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah, pretty crazy. I mean, you can
aim.
imagine if it was an uncontacted tribe, if you're sitting there with a bow and arrow and this giant loud thing starts flying over
Yeah,
you.
right. You'd be haunted,
That
wouldn't
would
you?
be
You'd be
terrified. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
that will make its way into mythology for them. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
can you imagine the stories they'll be telling about
Yeah,
this?
yeah.
And their
Great
kids will be
flying
like,
beast.
you know,
And
yeah,
no-
of course you
yeah.
did this
And
massive,
no
loud,
answers as well.
flying.
Like if we were to see something here, there would be answers, real or fake. There would be answers, and
Yeah.
people would come to a conclusion. Whereas
Yeah.
out there, they've got no resources, no one to
Yeah.
speak to about it.
Yeah.
It's like whoever the head is, whatever he decides, real or not,
That's
that's
what
the
it is.
belief. That's
Yeah,
what it. That
exactly.
must be what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm really curious. Obviously, you're doing these incredible expeditions on Earth. Now, let's say in 20 years we're across the solar system, or let's say 30 years we're across the solar system. Do you think your missions would ever go as far as doing something, say, on the moon or Mars? Do you ever see anything like that in your future?
Gee, I don't personally, but I would love to. Like
That
something
would
like that
be
would
cool.
be insane,
Yeah.
wouldn't it? But I think that would be I think that would be people within NASA, wouldn't it? Like absolute experts in that field, unless they need some sort of random dude who's willing to risk his life. Let's throw him up.
Yeah, maybe you'd just be one of the people who'd just be up for it. Because I mean, it is an interesting question, because obviously you do all this and you've spoken about things you love about it and stuff.
Yeah.
But getting really deep into it, sort of what is the end goal for you, and what, let's say, for example, and obviously we don't wish, and if you'd like us to skip this question, you're more than welcome to. But we do speak about life and death quite a lot. Say, for example, something went wrong on one of your expeditions and you didn't make it. Do you think in your final moments you'd be going, I didn't actually do what I set out to do, like I wanted way more? Or would you be like, wow, I'm dying doing exactly what I love and I have no regrets? Like, do you have any idea where your headspace might be, especially having come pretty close already?
Yeah. It's one of those where I think now I'm in a different stage of life. Now, I've got my girlfriend. I would love to start a family. So that's a huge, maybe if not the biggest thing that I would be missing out on. That would be a massive shame. But you take this away and focus in on life lived and career. I think at the end of it, I'd be like, fuck me, I've lived multiple lives. I feel,
Yeah.
That I would never still be happy because you've still got, you know what I mean? You would never be. But if it came to it, I'd be like, look at what I've done, where I've been, what I've seen as a whole. That's pretty fucking cool. Especially the whole, so when I was younger, going back to actually maybe why I do all of this, I fucking love James Bond, Action Man, all of this sort of stuff. And I remember thinking, I don't want to be 100% great in one specific thing. I'd prefer to be like 80% good in a multitude of things. And land, air and sea was always something that I was fascinated by. I want to learn how to scuba dive, how to get my powerboat license. I want to learn like martial arts, how to survive in a desert, jungle, mountains. I want to get my paramotoring, my paragliding, my skydiving licenses. And I've managed to get all of those within the past 10 years as well. Wow. So I would love to one day do a mission called Land, Air and Sea. Mission Land, Air and Sea, where you do a journey via land, air and sea activities, not by hiking or running or cycling or whatever it might be, but various activities. And I think now that I've sort of ticked off the air element as well, because it was always sea and air, sea and land. I don't know, it's kind of like, it's a life well lived. It would be devastating, but at the same time, I've tried to get in as much as I possibly can within such a short space of time because I set off it at age 19, and from age 19, it's pretty much been non-stop up until now. And even now we're still going,
Yeah, still going.
Yeah.
What do you think the air element would have to be? It's a tricky one to...
I think just dropping in. I think one thing that I did have planned in South Africa, without giving too much away, I think either flying by plane or helicopter or paramotor, the paramotor, it's like paragliding with the motor on the back, but then jump from the helicopter, fucking almost halo effect, skydiving to the start point. Yeah. And then from that, you could paramotor or scuba dive or kayak along the coast. And then from that point, it could be more of a land journey and then end at a peak.
That would be good.
I would love to, and the sea locate, I would love to sort of follow the sardine migration, scuba diving, follow that as it cuts through. And by powerboat, so you're still sort of covering distance as well. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like paragliding and skydiving mixed in with scuba diving and sailing or power speedboat or whatnot. And then surviving and hiking / climbing.
Yeah, that is very cool. I'd love to do that paramotoring. That sounds like a way I'd love to do countries like this, like sitting in a chair, fan behind me, the jaguars and piranhas and caimans are way all down there. Good luck getting me.
You're not coming down.
Although again, you could imagine you're safe and just be like, looking at the jaguars being like, unlucky pal. And all of a sudden you go over and there's like a clearing in the woods and 1,000 arrows just shoot your way. Shit. And you're just like, brilliant. I thought I was safe up here. What a way to go.
Yeah, that would be scary, wouldn't it? That would be. Yeah. But yeah, fun, something like that would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that is very cool.
My paramotoring instructor, he did 2,000 miles down the coast of Brazil.
Wow.
Paramount, just stopping in at different villages. Would camp the night, and then he would take his food and drinks up with him. So he'd be eating up there whilst
Wow.
flying.
That's amazing.
That's pretty cool.
And you get to see everything as well as when you're that high up. That
get
does
to
sound
enjoy
good.
it. And
Yeah. All I've seen of that is there's a guy on TikTok who will like use it just to go to the local McDonald's. He'll
wow.
take off from his garden, land in the field next to McDonald's.
So cool, isn't it?
Grab a McDonald's and
I'd
Paramount
love
back.
that.
Oh, what a life.
That would be great, wouldn't it?
That would.
I remember when I was training, we could see some guy flying in from the distance. I remember seeing the instructor really confused, saying, he's not one of our guys. And he was coming in, and he was late for his lesson. He stayed for an hour because he was doing his advanced. Then he flew back because his wife was making dinner. And he literally landed back in his garden.
Oh my
That's amazing.
goodness.
Flew there to do a lesson, flew back for dinner.
That's
Wow.
amazing.
Like, wow, that's so cool.
No, that's amazing.
Oh, so yeah, it would be nice to, I would like to still do these, mix in land, air and sea. Do it safety in numbers and do it for TV so we reach a wider audience.
Well, I could definitely see like a Netflix special on something like this.
Yeah, you know what? That's I want to attack Netflix for the whole Mongolia, Madagascar, the Yangtze, and Suriname.
Yeah.
And have it as like one mad sort of story.
Yeah.
Like a docu-film. 60, 90 minutes of just mad shit and crazy stories.
Yeah.
You know?
And I could really see that. I'm surprised they haven't picked it up, but who knows?
Who knows?
It'd be right around the corner.
Yeah, who knows? I think with the support, I think that it comes down to social media again, doesn't it? I feel that if this social media really helps and takes off in Suriname, and these channels see that, well, hold on, there is demand.
Yeah.
People do want to see these shows. I think then it's a no-brainer because it's less of a risk.
Yeah.
Because it's happened time and time again where I've been promised this, promised that by TV, didn't happen. I've been like, fuck. It's not a waste because I've still done it and it's been an epic experience. But sometimes it has been heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You know, even the Great Wall of China that I filmed, Channel 4 was supposed to take that. And for 4 months they were on board.
Yeah.
The final contract that we were signing, they couldn't because there was a change
Oh,
with Liz Truss being Prime Minister. It fell through and I was like, Channel 4 was always sort of my go-to channel since Mongolia 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And that finally I was like, 7, 8 years later, I've got it, and it fell through. And, but I think with demand, if the UK sort of finally gets behind me and we build up that there is demand for the shows, then maybe we could see Suriname in the UK.
I don't doubt it for a second. I really don't.
So hope
It's-
so, man.
I bet as well, this is just the start. It'll have a million different things, especially starting
time.
this young. You know, you'll be one of these men at age 60 and you'll just have one of these Wikipedia pages that just takes a while to scroll through even just the chapter headings because it's like
all the crazy shit you've done.
near-death experience part 1, 2.
Yeah. So I hope so. Same with books as well. I remember going to Penguins and they were like, it's great, but you don't have the following, so we can't produce a book.
Right.
And I'm like, really? Based on the following? But again, if it builds up, if I can get a book out there.
Yeah.
I have got the book Mission Possible from when I was 27, but there's no book on the Yangtze.
Right.
And I want to do Mongolia, Madagascar books like better. I need to really tell the story because it was all very rushed.
Yeah.
Like, let's do it, print it out there. So I've got something on my UK theatre tour so we could sign, make more money. Shouldn't have done it that way, but I did. But now we can do it better next time around.
Exactly. And I'll be rooting for you all through Suriname.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
do you want to tell everyone where they should go, what your usernames are on various social medias?
Yeah, so it will be everywhere. So Instagram, which is just Ash_Dykes. Same with YouTube, it's just Ash Dykes.
Clean.
It will be
It's always
TikTok
good
as
to get a
well.
clean username.
Yeah, it's all there. And then, you know, if it all goes well with the satellite communications, I'll be posting a video a day, every day from the jungle, live from the expedition, no excuses.
Brilliant.
Wow, wicked.
And all the links will be in the description, of course. And hopefully we can get you back on after
Let's
Suriname.
definitely run it
and
again.
Oh,
debrief.
yeah,
That would be brilliant.
Definitely.
That would be excellent. If you survive that.
Yeah.
I will be back.
You'll be back.
And
I'll be
hear
back.
about the next thing that you've planned whilst you're out
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
Yeah.
The moon. He's going to the moon.
Right, well, this has been one of the most fascinating
Oh, it's been
things I've
amazing.
ever done in my entire
thanks
life.
for having me, lads.
What an
Appreciate
insane array of stories. And
Yeah.
I bet there's a billion more. So, yeah, everyone, I'm sure will go check out your social medias, find out some more cool stuff. Best of luck with it all.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Best of
Thank
luck in
you.
Suriname. Thank you for coming on.
that. No problem
And
at all.
Suriname, watch out
Yeah.
for the snow leopard.
Yeah,
coming.
yeah. He's coming for you.
He's coming.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Go check out all the links. And make sure to subscribe because he'll be back, I'm sure.
He'll be back.
Yes.
So-
100%. Yeah. No, what a cool episode. Appreciate that, lads. Thanks once again.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoy it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Bye for now.
Bye.